Hello and welcome to our Tuesday evening workshop, starting a little bit early here. Thank you so much. We have the Honorable Craig Saddlemeyer with us, and we are continuing our discussion on shelter licensing. If you can take it away from here, that'd be great.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Saddlemeyer. I am the co-chair of the Shelter Committee with Councilor Roy, and we are picking up where we left off on the review of the proposed license ordinance changes. Just to remind everyone of the procedure we were using, I'm going to go item by item. I am just focusing on items that council had flagged for the committee's consideration. I'll briefly review what the council consideration was and then what the committee's recommendation was, and any of the thinking behind that recommendation to the extent that it's not clear. And then council discusses, and the mayor basically seeks a poll for each item so that Kathy knows, or city staff know what to prepare for a final action at a future council meeting. So just wanted to review the process we were using last time. With that, we will pick up where we left off, which is on the document I have, page 7, item 4. The council consideration was to add into the item only applicable in initial applications. The committee agrees with that. What item 4 is speaking to is land use approvals, and building permits, and basically this is just all things you do for an initial development. It's not something that you'd be doing for, after you've developed a site. So that's why I believe the council's logic was only applying it to initial applications, and the committee agreed.
Yes, Councilor Chittum.
I'm sorry. I think there were a few other things that would, in my view, be applicable only for the initial application. One of those is a description of the premises, item 6. That would be a one-shot deal because the application or the licensing requires any changes to be noted in the annual renewal application.
I agree. It's consistent with the logic. The committee didn't discuss it because it wasn't called out, sure. But yeah, that makes sense to me.
My goal is to make this as simple as possible. So burdening the applicant with redundant information on subsequent years just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I agree.
Further comments or questions from the council? I think we're good.
Okay. Moving on. Looking at page 9.
8.
Page 8 and 9. So this is with regards to item 4 on page 8. So it has to do with the number of shelter beds permitted to be licensed in the city. And this is for shelter beds that are those beds other than ones that serve homeless families, youth, or children. So those categories are not limited currently by the ordinance. But for beds that are not serving those people, the limit is 120. Council asked proposed consideration of eliminating the item altogether, or which means that there just would not be a limit. Or option 2 was increasing the bed number limit. The committee recommended option 1, agreed with option 1, which would be eliminating item 4, which would eliminate the limit. I will stop there.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. Yeah, I would recommend option 1 as well. I think it makes more sense to, rather than limit the total number of beds in the city, to have it be shelter by shelter, so it's consistent with the zoning if you were to open a shelter in say a zone that was, bordering on a residential neighborhood that was all single-family homes, then maybe it wouldn't be appropriate to have a 70-bed shelter there. But, yeah, to me, it just makes more sense to have it go by the facility or at the facility level rather than having a limit that's somewhat arbitrary over the whole city.
We're good with just eliminating the option? Yeah, no, I'm in favor of that.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Chittum, yes.
could I beg your indulgence and go back again to the previous item? I think the operations.
What
plan-
page would that be on?
The prior page.
Yes, okay.
Chapter 22-7. We talked about eliminating certain requirements on renewal applications. And as I'm going through this, I'm refreshing my memory, and it seems to me that an operations plan, unless it changes, wouldn't be necessary for renewal applications. Any changes, of course, would require submittal. But if the operations plan is a static plan, then that need not be submitted with a renewal application, in my view.
Councilors, thank you. Councilor Chittum, before I get to the councilor's thoughts, can we get your thoughts, Mr. Salmeyer?
I guess the other one seemed to sort of fall in line. I mean, it makes sense to me. I'm hesitant to comment on stuff that the committee, generally, I feel I'm here to represent what the committee has weighed in on, so I hesitate to improvise the committee's position on that. I understand the logic, though.
Councilor Chittum, did you?
I thought that we had listed a number of these items that would not be required on renewals, and somehow that was translated into item 4 only. So may I ask that the committee go back and look at all of the 10 items to see whether it feels that they all ought to be submitted on renewal applications? Is that too onerous a job?
If I may, Mr. Stoudemire, I understand your reticence to comment where the committee hasn't, but if it would be appropriate for you to answer personally here, we would take your input.
Tim's got his hand raised.
I understand. We will let you think. Yes, Councilor Gallant.
And having gone through all these myself, I do think they're important because a pre-established unit may change what they're going to do. That's the purpose of having this in here. Ours is a low barrier. We have no females. We have no families. They want to come back and reapply with families or kids, and that all would apply again. That's the reason it should stay, not go away. So that our group of people who review these would be a flag that it's just not him reapplying for a low barrier. He's now reapplying for a low barrier with a different.
Yeah, we need you to use your mic, Councilor Gallant.
Sorry.
Thank you, Matt.
They would reapply to those who may change their spectrum on what they're going to be doing one way or the other. So I would like to see those left in there, just as they're written.
Yes, Councilor Harriman.
Thanks. Yeah, it seems like if, these are annual applications, it seems like if nothing changes, the applicant could just submit the same, they'd still have the materials from the year before, and they could just submit them again. I do understand number 4 seems to make the most sense to take out because it's talking about approvals from other bodies, but yeah, it seems like they could just submit the same information, and it wouldn't be too onerous.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I understand your point of view, Councilor Chittum, and to streamline things as much as possible. I mean, if it hasn't changed, it's just going to be attaching a PDF to the email. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's okay for now. Yes, Councilor Chittum.
Well, it's not a PDF and an email, it's a paper copy.
As the case may be, yes, thank you.
So
yes.
I think I formulated my thought now. So I guess my question to the council is as we go through this, if there's anything that the committee has not reviewed and made a recommendation on as of tonight, if there is something that the council wants us to review again, it seems like at least getting some sense of whether there is like quick majority support for us reviewing that. And then if we pick up a couple of those items, my question to council is, do we think those items will be simple enough that the committee can simply provide the amendment language for you to have in the action? Or do you think we will need to workshop these additional items?
Yes, no, excellent points. I guess that that's a good take. Is there council support for sending this back to the committee? Does not appear so at this point.
Just as clarification, you're referring to the one that we've just discussed?
Yes, on
Okay,
page,
all right.
page 7,
Thank you. All right,
the
I can
shelter
live with
plans.
that. I can live with that. It's just more trees for more paper.
I'm sure we'll be working towards an online application system soon. Thank you, everybody. Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Stonemeyer.
So, all right, so, yeah, we did that. Okay, where was I? I was on 5, which was, the council consideration was to remove all of item 5, which is basically a public hearing for a new license, a public hearing process for a new license application. The committee agreed with that based upon our understanding that eliminating that makes the license process more consistent with the way other licenses are granted in the city.
Looks like we're feeling good about that, council. Excellent.
Okay. I am moving to page 10.
Councilor Harriman.
Just to make a note real quick, so at the top of page 9, number 6, I think that'll just have to be amended just a little, because it says after a public hearing on an application. So if we're removing the requirement for the public hearing, we just have to take that phrase out.
That's on a new license, not on a renewal, correct? Right.
He's correct.
Yes, Councilor Gallant.
I agree with Council Harriman. Number 6, after a public hearing on the application, that, I think we probably would have to scratch that because it will no longer be a public hearing.
But are we talking about for a new license or a renewal?
5 only refers to new licenses, so 6 would go along with that.
Okay.
You concur, Craig?
Yeah, there may be little, if something in here references a thing that you eliminate, then those changes will need to be applied.
Correct.
So those are, I guess,
Staff can do that.
presume that someone is doing that in preparation of the final draft.
Councilor Najin.
My only concern with removing item 5 on a new license as opposed to renewals is that if it's, I'm not concerned about shelters in general, but a city-directed shelter, since there's city staff time and funding is being involved, I think a public hearing is probably something that we should do. I don't know if we could differentiate between any shelter and one that's city-directed as a thought, but just to name that, because I'm quite sure that there will be residents that would like to speak on both sides of any issue regarding a city-directed shelter, and removing the public hearing process shuts that down, so.
Councilor Chittum.
On careful review, I'm not certain where this came from. Don't Madam Clerk, do we not require a public hearing for the renewal of a special entertainment license, for the renewal of a alcohol license? Why would we not require a public hearing for the for an application for a new license for a shelter?
Sure, so liquor license is defined in state statutes, and that requires that in state statutes. Special amusement permits are a little unique in the sense that when the city ordinance was written, the state statutes basically matched the city ordinance for years and years. Up until 2017, when the state law was eliminated, but we maintained our city code of ordinances regarding special amusement permits and public hearings. So it was originally drafted basically to model state statutes. State statutes do not require the licensing of homeless shelters, to my knowledge. So it's really just on the local level.
Thank you. You're always a wealth of information, Madam Clerk. I still feel that something of this import and magnitude for an initial license really ought to have a public hearing. And I'm not quite certain how we as a council said, no, we don't think a public hearing is necessary.
Councilor Grant, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Basically, it's just another burden to put on somebody who's trying to open up something we need for the city. And as she stated, if we mirrored the state, it's not required. And I'd like to be as close to the state as possible and not make things more difficult for people to do business in Lewiston than anywhere else.
Yes, Councilor Najin.
Just to speak to Councilor Chittum's point, it's because it's a business license and we don't have public hearings on business licenses. I would have put forward, though, that a shelter is not, in my opinion, a business. It is something that is critical and crucial, needed in communities that have an unhomed population. But the business of sheltering people it doesn't necessarily sit right with me. I think it's a mission. It's more of a, if that's the type of business that we're aiming to attract, as opposed to needing in our community, then I think we need to relook at our business development plans.
Madam Clerk,
Yes, sir.
the council, at this point, the council still approves the shelter license for a facility, correct?
If you take this section out, is that the question? I'm trying to scan section 22.
Like it would be an agenda item where the public could speak on, or am I not thinking about this?
Well, I guess I'm trying to scan section 22-454 quickly to see, I guess at the end of number 3, it does say the city council. I'm just trying to see if the only language is in subsection 5 regarding the council being the license authority for new licenses. So I don't know if you want to remove all of 5 or just part of 5.
I guess the point I'm trying to make, if it's valid, so this would end up on an agenda item.
I'm sorry, the adoption of the ordinance changes?
Yeah, no. Should somebody apply for a shelter license to run a shelter, it would be an agenda item on a city council meeting, correct?
If the ordinance requires that the city council be the licensing authority, and that's what I'm sort of trying to look at real fast, Mr. Mayor, is that
I
in
understand now.
subsection 5, it clearly is indicating that the council is the licensing authority for initial applications. If you remove all of 5, I don't know if 1, 2, 3, 4 mention that the city council is the licensing authority. The city clerk's office is for renewals, and item 5 was designating that the council was the licensing authority for original applications, and therefore spelled out the process of the public hearing, the legal ads, and so forth.
Okay. Councilor Herman, you had something.
Thanks. Yeah, if you look at the end of number 6, it also mentions the city council. I don't know if the language is, if it's clear enough there, but it mentions that the city council will grant or grant with conditions or deny.
Okay, so if that's the desire of the council regarding these ordinance amendments, is for the council to remain as the licensing authority for the initial applications, but just in removing number 5, removing the public hearing process and the legal ad process, if that's the point of removing number 5, then I think Counselor Harriman's correct. 6 certainly indicates it, and we can maybe beef up the language in 6 a little just to make it clear who the licensing authority is for the original application.
Right, and I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's going to be on the agenda item, and there's going to be public comment during that agenda item, and it's, a public hearing could be redundant at that point.
If you remove 5 and 6, there is no public hearing.
Well, right, but we're just
planning
talking
board.
about removing 5 right now.
Versus public hearing.
One
We
second.
have the answer, it's already in here.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, anything further, Madam Clerk?
There would be a
Or
public
administrator?
comment if we did put an agenda item, but there's no public hearing if you guys remove that.
Right,
Okay.
okay. Yes, Counselor Chittum.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Administrator. The definition of licensing authority in the definition section of this ordinance says that it means the city council in the case of new applications and the city clerk in the case of renewals.
Perfect, so there
So
you
it will
go.
be an agenda item. There will not be a special public hearing.
Right.
There will be an opportunity for public comment.
Correct.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you for explaining that,
That's if we remove this.
even if that comes out.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I guess the point I was trying to make is there's still going to be opportunity for public comment in a public setting. Public can also submit comments to publiccomments@lewistonmaine.gov. Counselor Najin.
I'm not trying to sidetrack anything here, but section 22-454, number 4, it refers to the city clerk and bed capacity overall for the city. I'm just wondering if that was something that was overlooked by all of us up to this point.
No,
I believe we agreed it seemed like there was consensus for simply removing 4. And then we went back to page 7, and now we're
I
back
missed
on
that
page
part. Okay.
9.
Got it.
Yeah.
my fault.
We appreciate you owning up to that, Counselor Chittum. Okay, where are we at now for this? No, are we fine with removing 5 or
5 and 6, right?
wait, or just 5, right?
Could be 5 and 6, or 6 has to be
And
reworded.
rework 6.
5 and rework 6, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, 5 and rework 6, from
Okay,
public
I-
hearing to a public comment.
We're fine with removing 5 and reworking 6. It looks like we have majority support for that. Mr. Sotomayor.
All right.
Yes, Counselor Najin.
Again, I would reiterate, I think there's a difference between a city-directed shelter and one that opens in the city that's not city-directed, but
Thank you.
That's my,
Thank you. Mr. Sotomayor, next one.
All right, we are moving on to page 10. We're looking at section 22-455. Council consideration, entire section above should be reviewed, determine if appeals should be to the Board of Appeals or the council. And the committee did not have a comment on this item. It seemed like a technical procedural one. I know thinking back to when this was written, I know a fair bit of work went into the appeals as it appears before you, but I was informed by Councilor Gallant that it may not be consistent with the way things are done, so we did not come up with a recommendation here.
Yes, Counselor Gallant.
I was hoping that it would simply say.
You could just move your mic.
I was hoping it would simply say, in accordance with the city's appeals program, or appeals process, and eliminate everything else. Then somebody would have to go look at the appeals process, and it would fall into that. To me, it seems simpler than having its own appeals process. So I'll put it out there to the A-team on the bench.
Sure, so in another section of the business license ordinance, it talks about the appeal process. Most licenses are issued on the staff level. It's pretty rare for the council level, as we just said a couple minutes ago. So the appeal process built in the ordinance actually is to appeal to the city council, because the applicant is appealing my decision to issue or deny. In this case, the council is the licensing authority, at least for initial applicants, so you need a separate body to appeal to, which is where the Board of Appeals comes in. In addition, again, under the old state statute language, for special amusement permits, if they were denied, they would go to Board of Appeals.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Yes, Councilor Gallant.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I accept the way it's written that way, looking at going through that process, now that I have a better understanding.
Are we good, councilors? We're good.
All right. Moving to page 11. Section 22-457. Let's see here. Council consideration was remove the entire last sentence above, which means to strike out a section that says, City Council finds that the remedies provided under a particular section applied to the violation of this article in the terms of the license because the ordinance is a local law administered by the city and the ordinance requires compliance with the terms of the license and the city's local land use ordinances. That is a mouthful. Committee agrees with the council consideration. I'm trying to wrap my head around this myself. Well, the committee agreed with the council consideration, but I am at a loss at the moment as to why. Tim says it's not needed.
Councilor Chittum.
Yeah, I think it's unnecessary verbiage. It's already in the state law. The fact that the council in its ordinance has found that a violation of its ordinance would also be a violation of the state law is irrelevant. It's not necessary. So I think just to clean things up, that's why we as a council, I believe, said get rid of that, simplify it.
We have no objection.
I think we're good with that.
Continuing on then to page 12. Section 22-458. So council's considering a number of different approaches here around approval and operation requirements. And I guess because there's a number of them, I'll jump to the committee recommendation was eliminating the hours of operation requirement. And that is we want to have our hope is to have a facility that provides those hours of operation, but it seemed prohibitive to require it of all future licensees. So that's why it was recommended to be removed.
And that was the committee recommendation.
That's the committee's recommendation.
Councilor Gallant.
Our thought was, if you think of Hope Haven, they only allow people in certain times of day. So somebody could establish a homeless shelter and have different hours than 24/7. And that's why we thought that eliminating hours was important, just have their license there.
It is, what we've learned is that it's very challenging and very expensive to do a 24/7 operation. And that is still the plan with, the city's partnership with Caden's Kitchen, is to have a facility that does that. But in the event that other applicants may wish to operate a shelter, it's a very difficult standard to meet. So that was the rationale.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. If I remember correctly, I think this got put in there originally because that was best practice, but I agree with removing it. We would encourage shelters to be open 24/7, but they may not be able to be. So
Yeah, and I'd add, I think your memory is correct, and just so folks know, it doesn't, there's an exemption in here for the existing shelters.
yes.
So shelters that were not operating at 24/7, when this was passed, they're not required to increase their hours. I think the rationale when this was written was that, was around concerns with people not having anywhere to go when they're staying at a shelter, and basically trying to address that by requiring any new going forward, any new shelters to give them 24/7 access so that they're not put out on the street when they're not ready to be. And again, that is the intent with the shelter that's in development. But yeah, it is a very hard thing to maintain. So most new shelters probably would be very hard pressed to meet that standard. Sorry.
Very hard pressed to meet what
To
standard?
meet the hours of operation standard.
I guess I understand what the committee's saying, and if we remove it, it's acknowledging that something is better than nothing, right? Some shelter's better than no shelter. But yeah, I mean, I have a hard time seeing, especially in Maine weather, and especially, given the fact that the shelter is, depending on where it's located and its proximity to our downtown businesses, I have a hard time seeing how anything other than a 24/7 shelter is going to be suitable. Councillor Chittum.
I agree, and I'm wondering if there's a way that we can ensure that the individual at 2 o'clock in the morning has a place to go, and yet the shelter somehow is protected against the financial burden of having to be available 24 hours a day.
So one point of clarification is that this doesn't, a shelter operating 24/7 is different than it, so for, at the end of this, it says curfews may be applied for guests to return to the shelter. So someone could still show up, if folks say we admit people between the hours of 8 a.m. and midnight, we're 24, if you're here, you can stay here 24/7, but the service is 24/7, but there might be limited hours for entry. So that person may still be declined, even without changing anything, someone might still be declined at 2 a.m., and the shelter may still be consistent with this policy.
Thank you. The other consideration is asking residents to leave for a certain period of the day.
Right, that was the thing that this was getting at.
Has the committee considered the pros and cons of allowing a shelter to do that? I mean, obviously, the existing shelters are grandfathered, but any newly licensed shelter in Lewiston, is there an advantage or a disadvantage to telling its guests, you have to leave at 9 o'clock in the morning and you can't come back until 3 in the afternoon or 5 in the afternoon?
From the work that the committee did, and this is, I guess I'll just restate, well, the work that the previous committee did, we heard from a lot of shelters, and that period of time is just a chance for staff to take a break, to, clean the facility, potentially deny entry. Like, if you have a blanket policy that everyone has to go at a certain time, and I guess I want to clarify, I'm not advocating that shelters do this, but what I heard from shelters was it gives them a chance to basically deny entry to folks that were maybe being difficult, and they don't have, and that reduces payroll costs because during that time you don't need as many staff to be present at the site. So it gives them a reset period. But to the argument for having it in here, it is also a time when folks may not be ready to go outside, and they might be dealing with mental health challenges that they'd prefer to be in an indoor space and deal with. So there are reasonable arguments in both directions on this.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from other counselors what feelings are.
Thank you, Councilor Chittum. Yes, Councilor Najin.
So just my take on this. Right now, we currently have an MOU with Cadence Kitchen specifying that the city-partnered shelter would be open 24 hours. So I'm not overly concerned with what other shelters are doing, to be completely honest. I think that on different levels, there are different needs and different populations and demographics that are served by different organizations. I can tell you that even this winter warming center, there was a gentleman that had to leave at 5 a.m. every day to go to work, and was literally, he was coming in right when they accepted the last people in, I think, like always missed dinner, and like was staying there, for a short period of time anyways. And I think there's a lot of folks that when we're talking about shelter guidelines for the entire city, there's different populations that are being served. The need for the 24-hour shelter really answers to the folks that are dealing with persistent homelessness in ways that they're in crisis and they need a place to be all the time. Other folks, have places to be in between sleeping and going wherever they got to go. So just wanted to name that.
Councilor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. And to piggyback on what Councilor Najin was talking about, we don't want to limit this policy where people only feel they can do it 24/7, because then we won't have the shelters we need. If we have 150 people who need service tonight, and we can do 60 and the rest of them can do 30, I'd like to have 3 or 4 of the rest of the other type to get everybody off the street at least at night or in this most severe weather. Many of them are nonprofits who get churches and things where they have to turn it back over to whoever they're renting from. So by putting hours in there, you're going to eliminate people, the small, maybe 10 or 15 person type shelter that would be allowed to get people in at least out of the weather when it's really bad, and maybe give them something to eat and warm or change it, who knows what. Yes, they may have to be put back to the street in the morning time. That's unfortunate. Maybe they can wander around to another shelter that may still have openings, but I'd rather see something than nothing. And this would be nothing if we had to make these stipulations, in my opinion, for new businesses trying to get shelters.
Your thoughts at this point, Mr. Sattermeyer?
I mean, the committee's recommendation is eliminating the hours of operation. So I don't have any additional thoughts.
Councilor Chittum, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a way, recognizing what Councilors Najin and Gallant have said so eloquently, if there's a way that we can somehow ensure that there is at least one shelter in the city that does not evict, that's a harsh word, but does not require its guests to leave during the day.
Well, that's what the city's doing by partnering with Cadence.
That's the situation today.
Right.
But we're crafting an ordinance that presumably will apply in perpetuity. And it's wonderful that Cadence Kitchen is developing the model that would not ask residents to leave. However, Cadence Kitchen, unfortunately, is not going to be around in perpetuity. Would that it were. And others. Can we find a situation, can we create an ordinance that requires at least one shelter that will be available on those freezing, sleeting days when it's inhumane to be out on the street?
It sounds to me like that is not a license solution. That sounds like a city programming policy.
As long as the city is involved in operating the shelter, yes, we can address that.
I mean, I don't know
issue.
how you would
Yep.
require, I don't know what enforcement would look like if it weren't something the city controlled entirely. My initial thought.
Councilor Najin.
Just also to point this out, there is possibly a future in which we're not using shelters or as a form of housing for folks. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying that we're there yet, because we certainly aren't, but maybe in the future, 20, 30 years down the road, we don't have to worry about sheltering people that have no homes. And then also, on that same note, if funding dries up, there's a question of what we can do and how we can do it. And there's also a question of what we have for demand, right? So there's a possibility that we get the folks that we're most concerned about that are in crisis on main care, on PATH and HARP vouchers in places that are safe, or BRAP, excuse me, in places that are safe for them. And then maybe we just don't have the same type of demand. You know, it's I think having the flexibility, right now we have a 24-hour shelter proposal in place. We have an MOU. I think I understand what you're saying. I get the concern. I just don't know if we want to enshrine it because somebody's going to have to come back and change it if it needs to be changed. So I think the flexibility is, it's good to have.
I guess my only concern is, we started, this is a process that, started at the beginning of my first term talking about the need for shelter, and what's really needed right now is a 24/7 shelter. We don't need any, I mean, and I appreciate the work that our current shelters are doing, absolutely think that they should be grandfathered, but what we need is something that is comprehensive and has services and can help people. So I'm concerned about removing the 24/7 requirement because I'm concerned that we could possibly get something that is not going to be, what Lewiston needs right now. That's my concern. Councilor Sol.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I understand what everybody is talking about. So it says operate 24 hours a day. So I'm assuming that means if somebody comes in, no matter what time, they will be potentially registered when it says operate, not necessarily open.
It does not mean that. So curfews may be applied for guests to return to the shelters. So,
Because asking guests to leave in the morning and then come back, it sounds a lot like a warming center to me. So I'm not sure, is that what's going to be happening? Is that they're going to be leaving in the morning?
the question is, sorry, can you restate the question?
I'm not even sure what the question is, honestly.
Or do you want me to just try to summarize again?
Sure.
So what the hours of operation, as it's written, requires is that a shelter, once someone is a guest at the shelter, they generally speaking have, they can use the shelter 24/7. But there's staff there and it's operating, and within the other programmatic limits of what the services the shelter offers, they have general use of that shelter. As it's written, it still allows for, if someone leaves the shelter can still tell them, under this system, you need to be back by 10 p.m. We close our doors. We don't have anyone doing intakes after 10 p.m., for example. So that can happen right now. There are shelters today that ask people to leave at like 8 or 9 in the morning and go find something else to do and then they need to be back within a certain window of time in the evening when they're doing intake. And so they have to go, they have to come back within a certain amount of time, and if they don't make it back within that time, then they're not allowed back in. But they were made to leave in the first place. Those shelters, if a shelter like that applied for this license today, they would be denied because they're not operating 24/7. They're making people go maybe when they're not ready to. The shelters that existed when this was enacted that have that policy still can maintain that policy because they were grandfathered in. The exemption applies to them because they were in operation when this was passed. So if this hours of operation item was eliminated, then potentially a new shelter could operate with regards to hours of operation in the same manner that some of those existing shelters do. They could ask people to leave. They could close down for a period of time. They could, operate 4 days a week, potentially. They don't have to be open every day. They could just offer shelter certain days of the week when they think it's, most convenient for them. Or
But leaving that language in here says that they have to be open 24 hours, allowing
New
guests.
shelters
New shelters.
would have to be open 24/7. They're allowed to have curfews, but they'd have to be open, operating 24/7.
I support that. Yeah. I think it should be open 24 hours. I know it's going to be a lot more costly, but these folks they need to be able to get in when they're available. So, okay, thanks.
One second, councilors. Mr. Bucknell, did you want to come to the mic and say something?
Thank you. Chris Bicknell, Executive Director of New Beginnings. The funding formula for 24-hour shelters does not exist in this state. So if the city wants to open a 24-hour shelter, they have to provide the funding for the hours that are not the overnight hours that are in the existing funding formula statewide.
Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Saddlemeyer. I think your solution of having an agreement with a shelter that's operated by the city or by its contractor that has this stipulation in it addresses my concern that there be at least one shelter that does not require people to leave. So having it a programmatic requirement instead of a legislative requirement makes a great deal of sense to me, and I thank you for that suggestion. I'm comfortable with removing this from the ordinance as long as the city is in the business of contracting for a shelter and can stipulate that in its agreement.
Councilor Glant, you,
That's why I was going to echo what he just said. Thanks.
okay. How does that, our Administrator Hunter, our Administrator O'Malley,
Yeah, we're just looking to get some direction how many want us to remove it, if we can get thumbs up to remove the 24.
yeah, it looks like
Okay, so
we
it looks
have
like,
some.
okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you. We were getting there. Yes, Mr. Sotomayor, what's next?
Just pointing out, it's 6:18, I think this is scheduled to go till 6:30, is that correct?
Yes, I mean, ideally, but I don't want to schedule another workshop for this, so I would like to continue.
We do have several people here, Mr. Mayor, for our next,
No, and I understand that, and, yeah, depending on time, we may be in a position where we start the meeting late. Please continue, Mr. Sotomayor.
Okay. So item 3, this is sort of page 12 continuing on to page 13. So at the bottom of page 12, item 3 regards staffing and on-site supervision. Council consideration was to remove it. Committee's recommendation is to amend it. The bottom line here is we thought it was worth clarifying that one or more on-site staff should be required for a homeless shelter during any time in which the shelter is occupied by shelter guests. So if there are guests there, staff need to be there. But if guests are not there, for example, the shelter's not operating during that period of time, guests are not there, staff are not required to be there. So we thought.
Good.
Makes sense.
Okay. Continuing on to the next item 4, council consideration was to remove all of item 4 this is with regards to the Maine State Housing Authority monitoring program. And we thought it should stay there. So basically, this is requiring that homeless shelters that participate in the Maine State Housing Authority monitoring program provide the report to the city when they are seeking license renewal, and that made sense to us. So we thought it should stay.
Looks good.
Okay.
Question?
Yes, Councilor Chittum.
The committee recommendation is that item 4 should remain with proposed language amendments.
Right, that was the minor, I mean, that stuff may have already been made.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Okay, so item 4 is staying then? Yes, all right.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't get into the smaller wording things that.
Yeah, that's my job.
Right, exactly. Okay, so now we're looking at items.
Duly noted, Mr. Chittum.
Item
Councilor
6.
Chittum.
Item 6 on page 13, public transportation. So option one for council consideration was removing the requirement that the shelter be located on or within a quarter mile of public transit. Option two was say that it's desirable but not required, which I don't think you should put in a license. Desires is not what you put in licenses. So the recommendation was option one, to remove it.
Councillor Najin, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just to speak to that really quickly, we also have influence over where the buses go, and if there's a need for a bus stop at a large facility, that's fine. I can tell you right now, there's a bunch of people that stay at Walmart parking lots right now, right? They all have vehicles. So, yeah. I suggest that I agree.
Yes, we're moving forward. Did you have a question, Councillor Harriman? Oh, okay. All right, yes.
Okay, continuing on. So item 7, this has to do with proximity to schools and daycares. Option 1 was remove this. Option 2 was to change the distance. And the committee recommendation was that the item basically remain, but that it clarify more clearly how the distance is measured. And it recommends that it's between the nearest entrances of each facility. So you've got some recommended language there in particular, but that's the substantial amendment that's being proposed. It's just a clarification of how you measure the 250 feet between the property of the shelter and any pre-existing school or daycare.
Councillor Harriman.
Thank you. I just wanted to voice that I don't think there should be buffers between shelters and schools and daycares. If we don't require them for hotels, inns, and boarding houses, then we shouldn't require them for other kinds of housing. But that can be an argument for another day. I'm good with this language here.
Thank you for that, Councillor Harriman. Councillor Najin.
I would just state that based on the entrances, one of the thoughts that I have immediately is any of the outdoor facilities like the playground, things like that. Like property line, I think or at least like occupied space might be a different measure. And the only reason why I'm saying this, when Councillor Gallant had mentioned, people who are maybe they're outside smoking and like visiting with somebody or something like that. I'm picturing like there's a chain link fence, there's a playground, there's like 5 people standing there smoking butts on the other side. Not saying everybody smokes butts. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to figure out how we can accommodate not restricting where the shelters can go, but how it can be appropriate for youth exposure to cigarette smoke and hanging out and that type of thing. I don't know.
Councillor Chittum.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Harriman. I don't believe that we ought to have separation distances. We don't for other uses. Again, it's a case in my perception of marginalizing the guests of a homeless shelter. So I would prefer not to see any limitations on separation from anything other than what the zoning ordinance already includes.
Councillor Soul.
I would like to see the distance stay, if not increase to the 500 feet, especially if we're talking about shelters that aren't going to require IDs. We have no idea who's coming in and out the door. The distance, the buffers need to stay, in my opinion. So.
Councillor Najin.
I hate to bring this up, but finding maybe a middle ground in there, thinking about like the good neighbor policy. Like there's pieces where, for instance, the overnight warming shelter did a lot of outreach to the neighborhood around it, and was responsive to requests by neighboring residents. And so I'm just wondering if there's any thought of a way to kind of enshrine something like that, to require like that any shelter operating work with the neighbors within, reason when it's in goodwill. So for instance, if you have a shelter that's next to a daycare, right, that there's no problem being created, there's no issue, right? But if there's a shelter operating next to a daycare where an issue is presented, like how is that handled in a way that is fair for both the guests and the established business?
Well, I think that's what the good neighbor policy does. I guess that's my initial thought, is that's the intent of the good neighbor policy. Reviewing that together and seeing whether it addresses what you're getting at would be another activity. But the simple answer is I think that's the intent of the good neighbor policy.
Councilor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree. We have to keep a distance, in my opinion. We have a problem now in the city. We have all these houses. The state of Maine is blessed with 6, 8, 9, 10 people in them, standing out front smoking, next-door neighbors in between houses, no regulations, no rules. And it's just it's a chaos. We get complaints all the time about that. Secondly, the school is an example. The teachers have a designated smoking area, which the students can see. So, you really, it's, they go to the edge of the fence or they go to the back of the building where the teachers smoke, they're still going to see people smoke. So I don't buy that. I agree 250 because we didn't, using the high school as an example, if you go where the new soccer field is and went up the hill and say that apartment building wanted to be a homeless center, it cannot. But it's got to be 2,000 yards from the nearest door. That's a foolish rule, in my opinion, based on that kind of a scenario. So, and there are a lot of open doors in the high school, so the circle is pretty wide. Same with our regular schools, we have front doors, side doors. So, when you go entrance to entrance, it makes a pretty good sized circle around a school or even a person who has their own home daycare would give them the same barrier. So that's why I support our rewrite that the committee put together.
I mean, I think that I'm okay accepting the committee's recommendation that there be a buffer. I mean, one of the other things I'm concerned about is that I feel like it would be difficult for the daycare to attract a business should there be a homeless shelter next door, and so there's that consideration. How are we feeling? Are we accepting committee or we accept?
keep it.
We're accepting the committee. It looks like we have majority support for that. Mr. Centermeyer, we have how many more things to go over?
We have maybe 5 or 6. I'd say 4 of them are pretty small. 1 there might be some discussion on.
In your, could you give us, based on your experience with the council thus far, could you give us your best guess for how long discussing these additional items will take?
I think we can knock it out in 5 minutes if council's ready to go for it.
Madam Clerk, please start the timer.
Absolutely.
Please continue, Mr. Sonnemeyer. Thank you.
All right.
Your positive
14,
assessment
item
of the
9,
situation.
demographics. Committee recommends leaving item 9 as it is. We don't know what the intent was behind rewriting it, but we thought it was written well. This is basically just getting some information, data that's useful to the city with the licensing process.
We're feeling good about that.
Okay. Item 10, committee recommends striking it because ADA law, ADA applies to residences and developments, et cetera, to whether or not the committee or whether or not the city has anything to say about it in a license. So ADA law is in effect. I don't feel that it's sort of redundant and perhaps confusing to the language as it's written is not helping anything, I guess, is the bottom line. So.
We're good.
Okay, so striking that. Now we're looking at item 11. So, item 11, we think the intent there is good. We thought it was simpler because basically youth shelters, and we can invite Chris to speak if we feel that's helpful, but basically because youth shelters already have to comply with a state licensing program, we just said that it should be simplified to say as much, that homeless youth shelters must comply with all state licensing requirements rather than make the language redundant or potentially in conflict with that.
We're good.
Okay. Then the next item, this is then the Good Neighbor Agreement, changing 800 feet to quarter of a mile, and the committee agreed with that, but recommended keeping it in feet, so changing it to 1,320 feet. So it's increasing the radius in which the Good Neighbor policy is applied.
Yes. Councilor Najin.
How is it 1,320 feet determined? Is it from like the door? You know what I mean? Like that, I guess it's an odd number, and so that's why I'm asking. Because I think abutters could change depending on how we're looking at that. That's all.
This says within a radius of the premises.
So anywhere to basically of the actual footprint of the land. Okay, gotcha.
Councilor Chittum.
The city has a tool that's very useful that measures a radius from the property lines. Premises could mean either the building or the property.
Fair enough.
If it's desired to spell out, I would say let's err on the side of making this larger and using the property line, using 1,320 feet from the property line. If you have access to a computer, you can identify very quickly all of the properties that affects.
Yeah, I definitely think it should be the property line. Depending on the layout of the property, the good neighbor policy could be within still the property line if it's the building. But-
Huge.
Yes, understood. Property line, we're good.
Okay, the next item on pets, currently licensed says guests shall not be permitted to bring pets. Committee, council consideration was to remove, committee agrees with removing it, and that each shelter can simply decide its own policy regarding pets.
That was 6.5 minutes, Mr. Settlemeyer.
Sorry.
I think
I thought we could do it in 5.
we deeply appreciate your help and assistance. We appreciate the entire committee. Yes, and thank you, Councilor Roy, for co-chairing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Chittum, did you have
Question of
something?
process. Madam Clerk, these comments are going to be formulated into a revision of the draft ordinance and then brought to us for a first reading.
Yes, the deputy city assistant, acting city administrator just said we'll bring it on October 15th, the next council meeting, for first passage.
May I ask either of the co-chairs if that creates any kind of timing issue?
I don't, yeah.
Based on a timing, we thought, because this ties into the next one we're going to tackle, which is the ordinance and how far, if we're going to have barriers, no barrier areas. So that being done then will work out great for us as we chapter into the next section. Our goal is to be done in December with both pieces, so that anybody could apply January 1st in theory, under the new system. Make sense?
Thank you so much. Or Mr. Bicknell, did you have something? Please come to the mic for audience at home.
There are warming centers that are going to be opening up shortly before January 1st that need to be licensed by the city. Will they be licensed under the old?
Well, not this ordinance, though, because they're a warming center.
If it's a warming
Not a shelter.
center, it doesn't need licensing. If it's a homeless shelter, it does need licensing.
Right, and so where's the definitional difference?
In the land use code, is my understanding, from the past 2 years of our warming centers.
And that's more of a
Say
zoning
we
than a
can look at
licensing.
it.
I'll ask the question somewhere else, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for everything, Craig.
Thank you.
Councilor Gallant, may I have your attention, please? Thank you. Yes, and we are now up for our choice neighborhood presentation, and we're going to run a few minutes over, so we still have 30 minutes, so we're good. If you can all three introduce yourselves, that would be wonderful, and then please kick it off. And if I can have councilors hold their questions until the end of the presentation, that'd be great.
Right, and we are going to try to blaze through this, realizing we're constrained on time. Let me say, I'm Lincoln Jeffers.
I just gave you 30 minutes. We're good.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Lincoln Jeffers, Development Director for the city.
Catherine Elliott, Development Officer at Avesta Housing.
Chris Kilmurray, Lewiston Housing.
And we're trying to pull this PowerPoint up. I've got to say, this started with Catherine sort of saying, hey, I'm going to be in town for some projects here. What's going on? Security alert. I tried to load this beforehand, and Matt, I don't know if Matt's still here. Let's see.
Yeah, no, Matt, I'm sure is here. Oh, there we go.
There we go. So this should be familiar ground for many of you, probably participated in this process. Growing Our Tree Streets came out of a choice planning and action grant. It was a long process. Hundreds of citizens were involved with it. The Growing Our Tree Streets became the transformation plan. We ended up applying for a federal grant. The first grant was a $1.2 million grant. The implementation grant was a $30 million grant. All the work, the vision created by the residents who participated in that process is what informed that plan. The city and Lewiston Housing Authority are partners, with the Lewiston Housing Authority being the lead partner on the grant. And Avesta, with Catherine Elliott, is the sort of housing partner who is really driving the bus on most of the housing development. It's 3 phases. It's typical for these plans. You focus on the people, the housing, the neighborhood. You try to provide as much support as you can in coaching and mentoring to the people. Housing, you replace distressed public housing that's been identified as part of the choice plan. And with the neighborhood, you look to try to improve the public infrastructure, schools, commercial activity in those neighborhoods. These are all the partners who were involved. As you can see, many players participated, helped shape that Growing Our Tree Streets narrative, and it really led to a successful grant application. You can see some of the process here, the data collection, public pop-ups, housing focus groups. Misty Parker, who unfortunately is no longer with the city, really was the person driving this bus, with a lot of the support coming from the Goldman Foundation, who helped fund consultants who helped us with that work. And ultimate goal was that we did end up successfully raising or getting the implementation grant. Here's the timeline for it. We applied for the grant, the original planning grant back in 2017. We got it awarded. Transformation plan came to be. We then submitted the $30 million application. That $30 million award came midway through 2021. We just recently had a COVID. One benefit of it, we did get a 1-year extension on the period of performance for the grants. We went from September 30th of 27. It's been extended to November 30th of 2028. Catherine can speak more. She's built a lot of this. She built all this presentation, really. And there's a lot of slides for all the activity that is happening. I think is what it comes down to say the least.
We'll go really fast.
We'll go really fast. There's about 45 slides, so I'm trying to talk as quick as I can here. A lot of this we've touched upon. Chris, could you say just a few words on what Lewiston Housing's doing with the people?
Yeah, we're really just working to meet the residents where they're at, help them get referrals over to our partners, whether it be Strength in LA or Tree Street Youth, helping kids get into programs, summer programs, after-school programs, helping people get jobs, keep jobs, get into the FSS program, which is a bigger conversation at some point if people are interested in it, but it's a way for them to be able to bank large sums of money based upon the amount of money they pay into their rent, the differential between what their rent would have been and would be under the, with increased income. And right now we're really working with a lot of the residents since Wedgwood's about to open up to discuss their options on whether to relocate for the families that are in the identified units that would be moving to Wedgwood, and whether they want to take a housing choice voucher and move somewhere else or move to the Wedgwood property.
Catherine is going to have a whole pile of slides. Why don't you save your slot for once you get rolling here? I mean, don't let me. Why don't you? Anything you want to say here? Okay. Just trying to keep us rolling, get us started. The neighborhood, a lot of this has been expanding childcare, Promise, added 50 slots. They moved into Lewiston Housing Authority's old facility right next to the fire station. On College Street, the B Street Health Center is looking to really expand their capacity, expand medical, dental, mental health services. That's poised to start moving forward. There's been a lot of public art invested in this downtown area. And with this, I am going to roll it over to Catherine.
To housing. So one of the core pieces of this funding, as you all know, is the development of new housing to replace that distressed housing. So we originally applied for the HUD grant with the vision of 3 phases of housing. Because of the challenges of the pandemic and some of the cost increases, significant cost increases that we saw during that time, we consolidated the phases of housing into 2. So we have the Wedgwood phase, which, as you all know, is under construction. And then the second phase is DeWitt, which will be starting construction soon. So those 2 images, that's existing conditions before we started touching them. Just a summary of the units that we're creating. So it's 186 new homes, new units of housing that are being created. That number is derived from the original count of existing target site households within that choice neighborhood footprint. So there are 92 existing homes in that category, and we are replacing and then building again that same number once over, plus a couple of additional units just to make the numbers work well within the buildings. So it's 186 units total. A significant number of them are market units, which is pretty atypical of traditional affordable housing development because of the way the funding works. That's typically difficult to underwrite and include within these developments. So that was a really key feature of the housing that we're developing. And then the variety of unit sizes was important both to match the needs of the existing households that are within those existing units, and then also to respond to information gathered during that transformation plan process. So you'll see there's a significant number of 3-bedroom units, but also 4-bedroom units to respond to needs that were identified during that planning process. So phase 1, Wedgwood, obviously under construction. You all are seeing this daily, I'm sure. Total of 9 buildings. There are 82 units total. Of the 9 buildings, one of them is the historic Milton Wedgwood house, which is being restored using historic tax credits. And then the remaining buildings are all new construction from the ground up. The buildings follow 2 general footprints. There's that rectangular mid-block style building, we're calling it, that has the 2 peaked roofs and then the flat roof in the middle. Those have either 8 units or 9 units in them. The ground floor of those buildings are either 1 or 2-bedroom flat apartments, and then the 2nd and 3rd floor are 2-story townhouse style units that are either 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms. And then the corner buildings, that's that middle one, those are 12 units. Those have elevators in them, and those have a range of sizes from 1 to 4-bedroom units. Those are all flat units, so they're all fully accessible, or all on accessible routes, and then a number of accessible units within those buildings. And then the historic building at the bottom, that will have 8 units total in it once it's completed. So that you can see the progression before and during. That's not the most recent image of those buildings, A and B. Building A is the red one on the right-hand side, and Building B is the blue one. Building A is, we have our certificate of occupancy inspection later this week. And we are on track for people to move into that building starting in about 2 weeks. And then Building B will follow behind that, and we will kind of have this conveyor belt of buildings being completed over the next 12 months. A little more imagery of those. So each of these units has its own private entrance. So you can see that a little bit. Some of the units are accessed off the front of the building, and then some are accessed off the rear. We incorporate a lot of design elements that were identified during various different conversations with the planning board, with the community, with other design strategies and things like that, trying to mimic a lot of the priorities within the neighborhood. Floor plans for those mid-block. So this is just the mid-block buildings, but 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units. There's the 3-bedroom stacked unit and the 4-bedroom stacked unit. And then some interior photos. Bathrooms, kitchens, finishes. We have in-unit washer and dryer. The historic building, these are obviously some progress photos within that building. That building has been a real challenge. It is obviously a very old building, a lot of history within it, including 7 or 8 different fires that we gradually uncovered more and more evidence of as work progressed. So we actually have shifted the scope as construction has continued to make sure that we are addressing all of those needs structurally within the building. There's a lot of steel in the building now, well, in the carriage house of the building. Then we've got a lot of additional supports within the building, all the way up to the 3rd floor turret to make sure that it will continue to stand. So it's in a lot better shape now than it was 6 months ago. And a lot of asbestos removal, managing lead paint, and then a lot of adjustments within the footprint to make sure that we can accommodate units of the right dimensions. One feature of the historic tax credits is that every detail has to be documented extremely clearly. So measurements of reveals and how much the trim is, proud of different types of trim and matching the new replacement siding to match in kind the siding that was removed. So that image on the left-hand side, you can see a pine board on the left. That's a new cut board to match the profile of the piece of wood that's painted blue, which is a historic piece of siding that was removed, shaved down, lead paint removed, sanded, and repaired, and then painted. And then we are strategically installing those on different facades of the building so that we can get a consistent visual at the end. And the carriage house was also a big piece of that. So the carriage house is where there's a lot of steel in there. On the left-hand side, you can see where we actually slid the building off of its previous foundation and moved it within the site so that we could dig an actual foundation so it would be fully supported. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that concrete floor has been poured and the supporting steel beams. So there will be 2 units in that carriage house, one on the 1st floor and one on the 2nd floor. And then these, I'll click through these pretty quickly. These are actually images from the city that show that aerial progression of the site over time. A few different views, but you can see the foundations going in, floors starting to get built up. This yellow on building A over there, that's a vapor barrier. Got multiple floors on the mid-block buildings, roofs going in. And that's the most recent one that we have, but you can see we've got 3 buildings fully with roofs, the buildings A, B, and C, very uniquely named. And then the Wedgwood building, historic building up there in the top left-hand corner, a couple elevator towers, and then the building that we have not yet, there are 2 foundations we have yet to pour, or yet to kind of dig and pour. So that's the space along there are 2 open spaces along Bartlett Street, across from each other on either side of the road. And general timeline for when we're expecting the buildings to be completed. So the first one, Building A, is going to be later this month. Building B will follow. And then we'll have a couple in early 2025, and then kind of a bunch in spring, and then the last few over the summer. So that's Wedgwood. And then DeWitt, I've just got some images of the DeWitt progression. That obviously we haven't broken ground on that yet, but phase 2 is DeWitt. So the program for that is 2 5-story buildings that are right along Pine Street, ground floor commercial in both buildings, and then 4 floors of residential up above. And the bottom historic image you can see there, that's the DeWitt Hotel that used to be on site. The architects use that as a reference point for their design, trying to mimic some of that. And I think it's really interesting that the buildings we'll end up with there are of a very similar scale of what was there 100 years ago. DeWitt will be 104 units total, so it's 52 units per building. Those are all 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. They're all flats. There are elevators in both buildings. And then the commercial spaces, the building on the park side will have 3 commercial spaces, 2 of which are smaller in the 1,000 or 1,200 square foot range. One of them that's a little bit bigger, closer to about 2,500 or 3,000 square feet. And then the largest space will be in the Bates building on the right-hand side, which will be about 10,000 square feet. And there's parking behind both buildings, which would be for both commercial and residential use. And one of the exciting things that I was happy to see happen here is some of the coordination between the site on our side of Pine Street versus the Kennedy Park side. So you can see that plaza area in between the 2 buildings has that circular round, which mimics the circle across the street. And there will be some coordinated street improvements as well, raised crosswalks, bump outs to improve pedestrian safety on that street and visibility for crossing. So I'm really pleased that we're able to do some work on that streetscape as well. And the timeline for DeWitt, we are working through the funding process, which has been, is always a challenge. We've been working closely with Maine Housing, and the latest update that we have from them is that it looks like first quarter next year is when we'll be putting the final touches on all of the financing stack, and then working to break ground and start construction. And that'll be about an 18-month construction period, 18 to 20 months.
Yeah, and let me say, Catherine has been an incredible resource through this whole thing. She has spent a lot of time in front of this council, in front of the planning board, dealing with Maine Housing, really making these projects come together. And it has been very challenging. Lewiston Housing Authority and assistance with getting additional funding to help make these things. What was your construction cost increase from first proposals to?
We had about a 65% increase in construction cost from the first estimate that we actually got on the plans up until when we actually broke ground and had a final construction number. And some of that, a lot of that that's the pandemic increase number, and then you also have the year-over-year, inflation increases, because we've been working on this since 2019. So it's a lot of years.
It's a lot of years. It's been very challenging. I think you can see, and I mean, it's nice to see it real. The whole idea to get the residents into this was, let's get your vision. Let's make this a transformative project, and it's really been informed. I'm saying, were you?
No. Please continue with the presentation.
Okay.
We're going to take questions afterwards.
At the very end. Okay. Chris, this is really a combination. B Street expansion, we already touched upon, helping residents start.
Can you move the mic closer to
Sorry,
you?
yep. So a lot of these are in process or have come to be. B Street expansion, they're trying to get all the numbers together to allow that to start moving forward. The Health Access Navigator, Chris, is there something you can elaborate on there, or is it kind of what it says, just help people get better access? Okay, just what it sounds like. Promise Early Education, that's 50 new seats done at 1 College Street. There's water fountains, public art, wheelchair happening in Kennedy Park. There's benches, gaming tables. There's a lot going on to help improve that facility. We're hoping to get to home ownership opportunities, especially later in the plan as Maple Knoll comes down. There's going to be real estate available there. This also dovetails with other local dollar CDBG. So we're trying to help folks get in ownership positions, and community navigators, how do people land after they get relocated from some of the choice housing, the identified distressed public housing. Choice always leverages, that's the goal, is to leverage other investment besides. All in, there's about $34.2 million of the implementation. That does not include the planning grant. It was $30 million. There were 2 supplemental fundings, $2.5 million for one of the housing projects, $1.8 million for the other. So that gets you to that 34.2. We've been tracking other investment in that neighborhood. This is both public and private. And at this point, it's totaled, that's 2021 through 2024. There's nearly $111 million in new investment. Some of that's very small scale, just folks putting on decks, making improvements to their multifamilies, their single-family homes. That does include things like Bates has made some significant investments. Sisters of Charity has made some significant investments. Avesta built Gavro Place during this time frame. Raise Up built 18 units of new housing. So those are high level where we're at. And at this point, I think we're ready to open it to questions.
Thank you all so much. This is exciting. Councilor Najin.
First and foremost, I definitely want to extend my thanks to you, and to Misty as well. I know that I was on the ground as far as some of the planning phase, and certainly it's been a long time coming. I'm glad we're getting close to seeing some occupancy. I do have a bunch of questions, but I'm going to try to keep it short. So first and foremost, Maple Knoll and Lafayette were 2 of the properties that were identified as distressed housing and allowed us to acquire this grant. And I believe there's a series of scattered smaller sites throughout the downtown. My understanding is that Maple Knoll and Lafayette would be the residents that would be given first option into these spaces. Is that correct?
It's the residents of Lafayette and a couple of the scattered sites for Wedgwood specifically. Everyone's mapped out to a unit, so there's a 1-to-1 ratio of everybody who's in a unit currently that will have a unit. The units that map out that are from Wedgwood are the family units, so that's Lafayette. Maple Knoll is mostly 1s and a couple of 2s, so they'll be mapped over to DeWitt for the most part.
And you have, basically, it's a 1-for-1 exchange. Everybody who is currently in the distressed housing has a place to be once the distressed housing once the new housing is put up, correct?
Yes. Okay. Everybody who was a resident in good standing when they either left originally, they have a right to return should they decide they want to come back and they were a resident in good standing at the time when they left, or the people who are currently still living in the units there.
Okay, and it's certainly exciting to hear that there will be home ownership opportunities at some point, I believe, down the road. So Maple Knoll and Lafayette will not be subsidized housing based on what they're going to be demoed, correct?
Correct.
Do we have kind of a timeline on when they'll be demoed and when some of these properties would possibly return back to the tax rolls?
No. I mean, there's money in the budget. they won't be done until DeWitt is completed and leased up. So we're looking at multiple years before that happens. Not a person from Maple Knoll will be moved until we get over to DeWitt being completed, which is best case scenario 2 years away at this point. And there are families that are at Lafayette who will have to wait till DeWitt is completed as well. And so there might be opportunities to take a couple of the buildings down at some point in time, depending on how they're scattered shot around the property. But in general, the entire property can't be raised until we have completed all of the relocation of the residents.
And that's the procedure, though. That's the plan, to move everybody, demo the buildings, and then figure out what you're going to do with the land afterwards.
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to also say, just really quickly, I'm glad to hear about the partnerships with programming in the community. I think it's super important. You manage a portfolio of subsidized housing that there are several pretty much intact communities within those. And I've seen a lot of work done recently to connect people to services, and I think it's super important, and I'm glad that LHA is doing that. And basically, that's what I have at the moment. Thank you so much.
Councillor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have maybe two questions. The stuff that was taken down, there wasn't very many market rate, and you have a lot of market rate, and you're talking 1 for 1. If there's not enough market rate people, somebody would have to be displaced, I suspect, if they don't going to fit in that little envelope. And is market rate, for lack of better language, are they segregated into all the places, or do you have one unit that's market rate and one unit that's not? How does that fall out in that process?
I'm not sure I 100% understand the question, but I'll if I miss on what if my interpretation is off, please let me know. The units that we are 1 for 1 are all subsidized units. The new units that we're bringing on are tax credit and market rate. The market rate units, the 40 some odd market rate units, were what were subsidized by a good chunk of the was it roughly $5 to $6 million of the choice grant helped pay for those market rate units. The units are spread evenly across all the buildings. There's no market rate buildings. These are all intermingled throughout the whole property.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Chittum.
Thank you all for this incredible improvement to the city of Lewiston and its housing stock. A couple of questions. The 92 existing units that are being replaced with these new 186, are those the ones that were demolished for the Wedgwood, or do they include Maple Knoll and Lafayette? So all of those total 92, you're replacing those and then adding another 96 or 4 or something? Okay.
Correct.
All right. Ms. Elliott, you said that the funding for the DeWitt would be cleaned up in the first quarter of next year. Do you mean fiscal year or calendar year?
Depends on what your fiscal year, no, calendar year.
So we can say January, February, March?
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. We all agree on those
The
definitions.
city's tax year, fiscal year count, but yes, by March.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you for that. And would it be possible for all of us to have a copy of that slide deck? Is that what you call it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Could you
Yeah.
distribute that to the entire council? Thank you. Could you make it accessible on the city website, perhaps?
I'm sure we could.
I don't know who's in charge of that, but I'd love to have a copy.
We'll
I'm sure
figure out how to do
Administrator
it.
O'Malley will figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Councillor Najin, did you have something else?
Yeah, just really quickly, when you gave the $110 million of public and private investment, I'm wondering, could we possibly get a hold of just like high level, what those investments are and where they come from as far as public and private, like, so we could actually see them laid out? And also, I'm interested in the infrastructure improvements, not maintenance, but improvements, I believe. That there were some infrastructure improvements that were included in this, and I'd like to see that kind of like busted out, because like one of the big pieces is like we usually bond for any infrastructure improvement, and yeah, it just, I would like to see those numbers like in a way that like is, you know, a by the numbers type of thing, something that's easy to digest, and I would appreciate that.
Yep,
Yeah,
we'll get
thanks.
that to you. Yep.
Councillor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. One more. Thank you all very much. Can we get a viewing before it opens? Is that possible to go do a tour?
Yes, it's going to be open in a week or so, so if you can be available in the near future, we can get you in over there. Well, that shouldn't be a problem.
I would just love to see
Yeah.
the units before people move in, so thank you. I'll reach out to you all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we'd also love to get people through the historic building as well before that comes online. So that'll be early next year. So thinking like maybe February is when we could do a walkthrough of that building.
Is there going to be a ribbon cutting for this, Mr. Mayor?
I assume so.
There will be, but it's not going to be until probably we complete lease up, so, because the site is still an active construction site for quite a while longer,
Okay.
so.
All right, thank you.
And I'm really excited we're saving the Wedgwood House. Lewiston has a number of pieces of really great architecture, and it's great that we can make this work. Ms. Elliott, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. Yeah, have a wonderful day.
And I would be remiss if I didn't thank you all for your support as well, because through the funding, the TIF, the home funds, and also the work that you all did on some of the land use pieces as well, that made Wedgwood possible. I mean, that certainly would not have happened without the work of this council, the planning board, and the city's commitment across the board. So really takes a village.
We're pretty special. Director Kilmurray, Director Jeffers, Ms. Elliott, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. We are starting a little bit late, but we're going to take a brief break here, and then we will get going. Thank you all so much for your patience. Hello. Hello. There we go. Hello, and welcome to our Tuesday evening council meeting. Starting a little bit late. I appreciate everyone's patience. We're going to be kicking things off with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have the former city councilor for Ward 3, the Honorable Alicia Ray, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ray. Madam Clerk, I believe we're ready to begin.
Yes, thank you. All roll call votes for this meeting will begin with the Councilor of Ward 3.
I understand we have minutes.
You do the minutes of the September 17th meeting.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councilor Glant,
Second.
second by Councilor Najin. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Councilor from Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We are now up to public comment. Any member of the public may make comments regarding issues pertaining to Lewiston City Government. This period is reserved for non-agenda items. Public comment is also allowed during individual agenda items. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person. Please state your name for the record and please indicate if you are a Lewiston resident. Because this is the business meeting of the City Council, all questions should be directed to the mayor, who will ask staff to follow up at a future time. It is illegal for the City Council to allow comments related to personnel matters. All personnel complaints should be made directly to the City Administration Office.
Matthew Diagren, Ward 4. While it's been nice to see some of the items on the agenda moved up in the past few meetings, I'd like to point out we have people who receive our agenda and might look and say, oh, item 16, I'm interested in that, and go, well, it's not going to be till 9:30. Maybe I can attend and speak post-work. By moving items up, you might be cutting off the citizens and taxpayers who are coming out to support or oppose these later items. I know it's not your plan because you really do want to hear from all of us, I'm sure. I get it, sometimes we know that XYZ is in the room and gee, wouldn't it be nice if we get them in and out quickly? But let's be honest, they knew beforehand where on the list they were and they could be here a while. Last meeting you talked about having a community town hall so you can hear from more of us about what we'd like our local state delegation to look at, focus on. I think it's a great idea. Because let's be honest, some nights there are only 4 or 5 of us here for the whole meeting. I'll be honest, I have items I'd like to see them focus on, but right now that's not the time to discuss them. I'd like to suggest you do 2 of them, one an evening meeting and one a midday on a weekend to hopefully increase the number of members of the public who come out to speak. I'd suggest we do it something like how we did the hiring a new city administrator, but with the council sitting up there and us talking on a mic, but with back and forth allowed and no time limits. And because I still have time, please fix your rules so we're not simply limited to a maximum time of 15 minutes for all our public comments, and then you are required by your own rules to suspend them with no ability to restart them anywhere. Because if this rule doesn't really mean anything to this council, do the rest of your rules mean anything to you? Because it's now becoming much more common across America that the public is being limited by our elected bodies in how we're allowed to comment at public meetings. Thank you.
Further public comment. Public comment is now closed. Madam Clerk, I see we have a consent agenda.
We do. We have a consent agenda. Consent agenda this evening consists of 3 items. Item number 1, order authorizing application and acceptance of funds from the U.S. Department of Justice Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant Program. Item number 2, adoption of meeting schedule for the month of November. And item number 3, appointment to the Registration Appeals Board.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councilor Chittum.
Second.
Second by Councilor Najin. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Councilor from Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And yes, Councilor Harriman.
Yes, I wonder if at this time we could, if the council doesn't object, if we could move agenda item 9 up, just because we have some items ahead of it and that are going to take a while. Number 9 probably won't, and just to, in deference to staff's time, if we could move that up, that'd be great.
Do we have item number 9 here? Yes, we do. Director Brackett. Without seeing further objection, item number 9, Madam Clerk.
Item number 9, public hearing and approval of amendments to the general assistance policy for annual authorization of eligibility amounts. Requested action that the maximum amounts allowed for general assistance and the maximum allowed for food, housing, personal care, utilities, heating, fuel, transportation, and recovery residence expenses in the general assistance policy for persons eligible to receive assistance in accordance with the standards of eligibility be adopted as presented in accordance with the HUD guidelines and the current Thrifty Food Plan.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Chittum, second by Councilor Gallant. Director Brackett, please kick us off.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I am here to present the annual general assistance maximums. Appendix D, utilities, E, heating fuel, and F, personal care have not changed. Appendices A, overall maximums have increased by 4%. Appendices B, food maximums have increased less than 0.5%. Appendices C, housing maximums have increased by 4%. Appendices G, the mileage rate has increased by 8%. And Appendices H, the burial, has increased by 9%. Recovery residence rates have increased by 4%. These increases are effective from October 1st, 2024 to September 30th, 2025. The maximums are calculated by Maine Municipal Association and reviewed by Department of Human Services and the Maine Welfare Directors Association. And I have any questions?
Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Director Brackett. Were these figures included or anticipated in the budget that you presented to us for this fiscal year?
I don't believe so. No.
There was no anticipation that there would be increases in the allowances for
No,
these items?
we never know how much of a percentage it will increase and what categories will increase.
Okay. In March, you wrote us a memo in which you said that your resources were being outstripped. There was not sufficient resource to meet the demand. And now we find that regardless of what the population is, the amounts have been increased under HUD guidelines and others. We really have no choice in adopting these numbers. Is that correct?
Correct. It's state statute.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm wondering if it would be possible for us to have a semi-annual, or even perhaps quarterly update on the status of general assistance in Lewiston, what your resources are, what your funding is, and how you're able to stretch the meager dollars that the council has allowed to this department.
That can happen.
Do other members of the council feel that would be appropriate?
Wholeheartedly support that.
One second. Anything further, Councilor Chittum?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Najin.
No, he had referred to the council, and I was just talking back to him, just to wholeheartedly support it. That's all.
Excellent. Further comments from the council? Public comment for this agenda item? Back to the council?
And could I just add one thing?
Please continue, Director Brackett.
Yes. The municipalities are not notified of a rent increase until September.
Okay, thank you. That's something that we'll want to consider when we look at the budget for fiscal '26, the next go-around, which is coming up the day after tomorrow, I think.
Any further comments or questions from the council? Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Council from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes,
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you.
thank you.
Elaine, we love you. Item number 4.
Item number 4, public hearing on a renewal application for a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Acme Social Club Incorporated, 255 Park Street. Requested action to grant a special amusement permit for live entertainment for Acme Social Club Incorporated, 255 Park Street.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councilor Gallant.
Second.
Second by Councilor Chittum. Discussion. Public comment for this agenda item. Back to the council. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Counselor from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Item number 5.
Item number 5, public hearing and final passage for an amendment to the zoning and land use code, Article 15, significant buildings and districts for changes to definitions, the review of color and paint, and review of signs. Requested action that the proposed amendments to Appendix A of the Code of Ordinances, Zoning and Land Use Code, Article 15, significant buildings and districts, receive final passage by a roll call vote.
So
May I have
moved.
a motion, please? Councilor Gallant.
Second.
Second by Councilor Chittum. Director Connor, please kick us off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is the final reading, the final passage of this. We received no further questions after the last council meeting. We did speak as a department and as staff, and we took all of your comments back. And we do plan to notify the council in the future when we are going to be updating these ordinances, giving the council plenty of time to help us with some of these S movements and punctuation and things of that nature, to get more of a buy-in from the council as to how these should be changed. But this particular ordinance, we have not received any further questions, so barring any tonight, that's what we're here to do.
Questions or comments from the council at this time? Councilor Najin.
I initially voted against this, and I would just like to state for the record that I think delegated review authority for city staff is helpful, as well as the fact that any of the information that can be set forward in advance, for instance, if there's color palettes, things of this nature, so that you're not inhibiting business from being able to be established or development from being able to happen, because it's clear what will be required. And if anything else was outside of that, it would be a variance or a deviance from the established protocol, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I just feel like sometimes, I know that we have to enshrine these pieces, but I also feel that the Historic Review Board has not done a good job of preserving it. Well, their purpose isn't to preserve any of our historical buildings, right? And so like there's just challenges in which when you're trying to adopt old infrastructure or build new infrastructure in a historical district, this could be a regulatory hurdle if we don't handle it in a way that, one, delegated review authority is given, and then two, the things that we don't want to see are clearly spelled out so that people are clear in the things that we do encourage are. That's all. So.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. I apologize if I missed this when we had the first reading, but it looks like the addition of number 5 under section 5 about signage. Is it my understanding that currently staff reviews all signs, and this change would make it so that the board would review signs except for the ones that are exempted because they're smaller or for other reasons?
You talking section 5F number 4?
No,
Or
sorry,
5.
section 5, subsection C, and then 5. So it's under certificates of appropriateness when required, and then it starts with signage when located on an historic structure. It's
Yeah, we don't have page numbers here.
the,
But
yeah, it's the
Yeah,
third page of the,
I'm tracking you now.
okay.
So the number 5, signage when located on historic structure, are you asking, is that coming to staff or to the review?
No, it looks like that's a new subsection.
Correct. That was
so-
added to?
So is it currently only staff that reviews it and not the board, and it's changing so that the board is going to review it except for the smaller signs that don't require permits?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm sorry if I missed it the first time, but is there a reason why it's changing to that instead of just staff reviewing the signs?
That was brought up in one of the historic committee meetings, and talked about it with staff, and tried to make it as seamless and smooth as possible.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just share some of the concerns of Councilor Najin about, potentially just adding more hurdles to the process of opening a business or, getting it off the ground.
And we'll document whenever these come up, and so we'll have some historical data that shows, if this does become an issue, that we can always come back and revisit.
Okay, thank you.
Public comment for this agenda item. Back to the council. Councilor Najin.
I would just like to name again that sometimes we put things in place in order to stop something that already happened. And so there's one sign in particular, I think, that's very offensive to the Historical Review Board. It's already up. So delegated review authority, I think, it has value. I'm just going to name that. If we find that we have issues with the process, then I'm hoping that we can go back and change some of these things. Yes?
Okay.
Further comments from the council? Anything further, Director Connor?
No, sir.
Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Council from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
No.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 6 to 1.
Item number 6.
6. Item number 6, public hearing and first passage for amendments to the offenses and miscellaneous provisions ordinance regarding changes to the citywide curfew for minors. Requested action that the proposed amendments to the City Code of Ordinances, Chapter 50, Offenses and Miscellaneous Provisions, Article 2, Minors, Section 50-81, Definitions, receive first passage by a roll call vote and to continue the public hearing to the next regularly scheduled City Council meeting.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councilor Glant.
Second.
Second by Councilor Sol. Administrator O'Malley.
This agenda item was brought forward by Councilor Sol, so if she perhaps would like to address the council as to her reasoning behind that, I'm sure we'd be happy to hear from her. And the police chief is here as well. He can weigh in on that. I see him in the back of the room.
Yes, Councilor Sol, I'd be happy to recognize you first here.
Okay. Well, so I wrote something out. I just don't want to forget anything, so I'm going to just go ahead and read this for you all. So, like most folks here and at home, I have been trying to think of ways to help stop the increase of guns, drugs, and violence in our city. Over the last few months, we have learned that the number of teens acquiring guns is increasing. For every resident in Lewiston, this is both extremely concerning and completely unacceptable. If kids are carrying guns in broad daylight, then they are most definitely carrying them at night too. Gunshots have been fired down streets. Oops, sorry, I lost my spot. Gunshots have been fired down streets at night in densely populated areas where many children, including those without weapons, stay outside late at night without parental supervision. About 6 weeks ago, 2 minors out after curfew were found to have weapons. The police were able to take action thanks to the curfew violation. Expanding the curfew time by 4 hours per week will give the LPD a better tool to take more guns out of the hands of more kids. This will reduce the growing risk that neighborhood residents, both children and adults, will be shot for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Is this the answer to youth gun violence on our streets? Of course it's not. An expanded curfew is intended to be one of many responses to a situation that requires urgent action, not just talk. As the ward representative of a part of the city where much of the gun violence has taken place, I'm firmly committed to ensuring that no child has to walk in fear, no parents have to hear gunshots, or worry about their children's safety. So, I wholeheartedly believe that this can be a really useful tool. It's going to give the Lewiston Police Department just another chance to approach minors who may be carrying some weapons out after curfew. And I really hope that my fellow councilors support this.
At this point, yes, we have Chief St. Pierre here. If you could, before we get too much further, give us your thoughts on this, that would be great.
Certainly. Good evening. Councilor Sol approached me and wanted to know my opinion of it. this is a very minor change to our curfew violation, our curfew ordinance. What it does is really just adds 7 days instead of 5 days that the curfew is from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. It currently is 12:01 a.m. to 5 a.m. on Friday night and Saturday night. It just makes it now that every night after 10 p.m. it would be a curfew violation if you're under the age of 18. It's a small change, but it certainly provides us with a tool. I talk about this cliche all the time, a tool for our toolbox. We don't typically, or we don't often charge a curfew violation, but it allows us, if we see somebody youthful in appearance walking down the street at 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning, to stop them. It also helps parents when we bring that child home and explain to them that we just found this child, hopefully not with a firearm, but many times it's for smaller things. They got a bag of marijuana, they have some pills, they have a vape tool or something like that that they're not supposed to have at that age anyway. So I support it. I don't think anything good is going to happen after 10 o'clock anyway for them to be out at that time. And of course, all the exceptions remain the same. If they're, they're at a school function, they're in the course of their employment, they have a certain time frame that they have to get home. We take those things under consideration always. I don't think it's going to be a tool that we're going to abuse by any stretch.
Thank you, Chief. Discussion, comments from the council. Councillor Chittum.
Yes, thank you. I wholeheartedly support this expansion of the curfew hours, but I do have an amendment that I would like to make that has been distributed to the council, to the city clerk, to the city administrator, and to the police chief. And I think the proper way to do that is to read that. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? My proposed amendment would not change any substantive provisions of this. It would read, curfew hours mean the time between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. of the following day, period. I don't believe it's necessary to say this is 7 days a week. That's implied in the actual language. In section 50.3, defenses to curfew, there is a very long and unnecessarily redundant provision in section 7 that excludes people who are attending, and I'll read it all out, either attending an official school, religious, or other recreational activity supervised by adults and sponsored by the city, a civic organization, or another similar entity that takes responsibility for the minor, or within 45 minutes of the termination of an official school, religious, or other recreational activity supervised by adults and sponsored by the city, a civic organization, or another similar entity that takes responsibility for the minor. Excise all that language and clean it up simply by saying returning home within 45 minutes after the termination of such activity. Still the same meaning, but a lot clearer to understand. There is a provision that provides that if the 16 to 18-year-old, and this applies to people under 18, is or has been married, they're exempt. I see the situation where a 16-year-old has received parental permission to become married, 3 weeks later says, that was a dumb move, I don't want to be married anymore. They get divorced, and all of a sudden they have become exempt from the curfew requirements. There's further language that said that they had the disabilities of minority removed in accordance with state law. That's called emancipation. It would be a lot cleaner to say emancipation. And the state law that's cited in the current ordinance has been either changed or was an incorrect citation. It's actually section 3506A of Title 15. Our ordinance says 3306. And finally, we have a reference in section 50.87, the effective date, the division. This division shall take effect in accordance with the provisions of subsection 211.c of the city charter. It's actually 212.c of the city charter. I provided these markups and a clean version to councilors and staff.
Thank you. Is that a motion to
That was a friendly amendment.
A friendly amendment. Madam Clerk, does this meet the test of a friendly amendment?
Councilor Chittum and I talked about this yesterday. I believe it does because it doesn't have any substance changes to it. The original substance, and as was included in the legal ad, still remains. Basically, Councilor Chittum is just offering what I would call grammatical and wordsmithing changes just to clean it up a little. So I believe it would be a friendly amendment, but of course, the maker of the motion and the one who seconded it would need to concur as well.
And that would be Councilor Glant and seconded by Councilor Soul. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And is Councilor Glant and Councilor Soul okay with this?
Yes.
Yes.
It appears that they are, so it has now been accepted as a friendly amendment. Thank you all. Councilor Najin.
I would just like to mention on the marriage portion, I believe that when you're underage and you are married, that process does make you emancipated. I don't believe anybody is, once you're married, am I correct on that? State law makes you emancipated. That's the process. So you can remove that wording, and emancipation covers it. So.
Councilor Chittum.
To Councilor Najin's point, my friendly amendment did not include eliminating that exclusion. This is a curfew ordinance that pertains to people who are under 18 years old. Their marital status or their emancipation status should really have nothing to do with it. I would feel comfortable if the council wanted to remove that exclusion. If the chief has a feeling on that, I'd love to hear it, but I don't see how being married or even being emancipated through the court system would entitle a 17-year-old to stay out until 3 o'clock in the morning.
I think the emancipation portion of it allows for the child to actually make decisions on his own as an adult. So I think that's probably the purpose, is my guess, behind that.
May I suggest that the decision that the emancipated child might make would be to obey the curfew?
That would be a good suggestion.
Anything further, Councilor Chittum?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Najin.
To be clear, the emancipation piece stays in, correct? Correct. Okay.
At this point in time, yes. Further comments from the council? Councilor Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for being here. One question I have for you. Let's say, and I'm not against this, please do not, I know people are going to think I'm against this, but I'm really not. But the deal is you've got a youth who does not drive, could not go to a movie at 7:45 and walk home from Auburn into Lewiston because that movie is going to end after 10 on a Friday night. What would happen to them if they got picked up by LPD?
The likelihood would be that they'd be brought back to home to their parents, not necessarily charged with a curfew violation. I looked at the numbers today before I came here, and from 2020 to current, we've only charged 36, that curfew violation 36 times. Okay. Now, of course, we've charged it in conjunction with other crimes, such as possessing firearms and drugs and other more serious offenses. But again, it's simply a tool to allow us to say, boy, that is a very youthful appearing person that looks to be under the age of 18. We do it with alcohol. A lot of times we go out on liquor details that we get hired for. We get the training by the state and go out on that, and we are trained to visualize somebody's age.
Because they just know, like, as I was growing up, I didn't have a car, didn't drive for a while, and going to the movies, I would have never made it home on time. So that's the reason why I'm asking.
I think this also puts a little responsibility on the parents where it needs to be as well. Sure. Perhaps that parent needs to find arrangements for that child to be picked up by another parent that might have a car or a relative or something, not to just simply give the child carte blanche to just do whatever they want and get home whenever they think that they can.
Good point. Thank you for that.
Councilor Roy? I will tell you that I've been with the city almost 35 years, and the first almost 32 of it, I was at the police department. So back in 1990, this ordinance was in effect. So you probably were walking home, and the police didn't.
And you picked
take
me
it
up.
out.
That's why I brought it up.
For the public at home, that was a joke. Councillor Najin, yes.
Just to, I just want to verify something. So there's been 37 cases in which we've charged this, right?
36.
36. But in all honesty, the way that we're holding the data makes it very hard to figure out how many times we've actually stopped somebody for a possible curfew violation, correct?
Right, we don't have an actual a code for curfew violation. So what I had is my crime analyst run some numbers based on a sound, I don't want to say sound X, but a word search. So she put in ordinance, curfew, and then hand searched them all. It took her quite some time. She sent it back to me at 5:10 today, though she got out at 2:30 today. So I really just put it together quickly so that I'd have something to present and how many times we actually charged these people. I then also printed out all of the calls that had curfew in them. So it's a little difficult too, because when I had 142 pages to go through, I noted that some of them actually were adults that have bail conditions that include a curfew. So it's really not even a child.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I'm hoping that in the future we can figure out a better way to hold that data, because it's, I think sometimes it's important when we're trying to make a decision. But I'm quite sure there's been multiple times in which we've actually encountered youth and been like, time to go home, and not charge them. I would assume.
And it's very appreciated by the parents. You know, for most of the parents, it's well received.
Thank you.
We're now heading to public comment for this agenda item.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Alicia Ray. I'm a resident of Ward 3 and big fan of constitutional protections. I'm here because I wanted to express my thanks to Councilor Soul for thinking about this issue. However, I oppose this measure. Juveniles have constitutional rights, including the fundamental right to free association and travel. Those are fundamental rights declared by the U.S. Supreme Court, meaning they trigger heightened scrutiny when you enact an ordinance. In restricting those rights, this expanded curfew also undermines the rights of parents to parent their own children. It's really imposing a one-size-fits-all solution that really might not reflect the realities that were just talked about, not having a car, or possibly not even having a home. As the chief just said, this curfew and its expansion allows the department to stop young-looking folks without reasonable articulable suspicion or probable cause, which could be Fourth Amendment violations. And besides those constitutional protections that might be sacrificed in expanding these hours, research has shown that curfews are ineffective at addressing both juvenile crime and juvenile safety, which are both priorities here. Instead of preventing these crimes, they just create more opportunities for potentially volatile interactions between law enforcement and young people. And those interactions can escalate, further alienating our youth in our community and fostering the distrust that we've heard talked about a lot recently. One recent piece of research, a 2018 report in the Review of Economics and Statistics, is titled "Keep the Kids Inside: Juvenile Curfews and Gun Violence." That study found that youth curfew laws that were enacted in DC in response to gun violence increased gun violence in the city by 150% during non-curfew hours, particularly from 2 to 4 p.m., when most of us will be out and about. In addition to simply shifting the hours of increased gun violence, research has shown that Black youth are 19 times more likely to be arrested or charged with a curfew violation than white youth, further damaging the relationship between law enforcement and youth of color. I would ask Lewiston Police Department to provide more data, if you can get it, on the 36 folks who have been charged with those curfew violations since 2020, and racial data would help a lot in making these decisions on who has even been stopped for those status offenses. I also just want to quickly note that youth curfew laws are based on this false assumption that all youth have access to safe, secure places to live and go home to. and have adequate guardians to supervise them. For these reasons, I urge you all...
That's time, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Luke Jensen, 11 Sylvan Avenue, Ward 5. I'll take a neutral stance here. On one hand, I absolutely appreciate the initiative you're taking, Councilor Sol. There's a lot of violence that's going on in the city, and we need to do something about it, and we need to show the citizens that we're going to actually take action. And in that case, I really do appreciate the initiative there. So again, I do want to take a neutral stance, because on the other hand, I can think that the people who are going to follow the curfew are generally the good kids anyways. The kids that are probably causing problems generally probably don't want to go to their home lives anyways. A lot of those home lives are pretty abusive and just not great to be at. I hate to say it, but they'd rather be outside roaming at 11 o'clock than at home in those homes. And if they can't be outside, they're not going to go back to those homes. They're going to go to other homes, and they're going to associate with people that they probably should not be associating with. So I don't want to say that this curfew is going to be like a magic, silver bullet to solve everything. It could make some progress, but it could also do some harm. But that's for you guys to decide. You have more information than I do, and I'm here without any stats or anything like that. Those are just some thoughts I had. But being I guess now that I'm 33, I don't look as young as I used to, but a youngish looking person, there's plenty of nights where I'd, get insomnia and walk around at night. I just want to know that if I get stopped by an officer, I like a good interaction. I'll be friendly. I get it. I look young, haha, icebreaker. But I want to know at that point that I'm free to go. I'm an adult. I'm good. I'm free to go. I don't carry around fireworks or there's, stuff on me anyways. I'm a pretty tame person. But I want to know as an adult that I'm not going to be harassed at that point. Because if they know I'm above 18, there's no reason to keep me there. I also want to know that when I'm driving my car that I'm not going to get pulled over and ask for other stuff. I'm going to be very insulted if I get pulled over and let's say that I'm under 18. I'll just be flat out honest with you guys. You guys are going to know if that happens to me. So I just want assurance, and I'm sure this is the case, but I just want assurance that if someone like me, an adult, gets pulled over and are asked to show ID to prove that we're actually 18, that's the reason I'm getting pulled over, that I'm not then asked to show insurance and all this other stuff. So if that's the case, that I'm going to be, to me that's harassment. I'll just be flat out honest with you. That should not be happening. So I just want assurance that that's not going to happen. I know there are a lot of bad people in the city driving around that I do want pulled over and searched 100%. I just want to know that, people like me that don't have any criminal record or can not get harassed. You guys are picking up what I'm putting down, I think, so I'll leave it there.
Hello, Wendy McPike. I live in Auburn, but I have property in wards 1, 3, 5, and 7. So when I first saw this, I was like, oh, yes, I think this is a great idea. We have cameras on multiple properties in the tree streets. I see over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, lots of youth out 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, often doing behavior that's questionable. I know growing up in an affluent community, we had a 9 p.m. curfew in the summers. And it wasn't just to keep us off the streets, but it was also to protect us from other people that might be doing nefarious things. So for me, I go back and forth on this. Would I want to stay out till midnight on a weekend as a 17-year-old? Probably. But for what's happening right now in the tree streets and in the downtown area specifically, I think having kids out there is looking for trouble on both sides. I'm not so concerned that all of them are carrying guns, because I know they're not, but they're definitely involving in behaviors and getting approached by adults that are known drug people and such. So that's the part that worries me more than anything, and having the ability to perhaps stop a youth that's on the street. Maybe they don't have a home. I don't know what that process is. When they do stop someone that is unhoused as a youth, I don't know what that looks like. But if there's a chance for an early intervention or to show some care and concern and to get someone back with a parent, I'm all for that. That's it.
Jocelyn Dixon. I live at 163 Bates Street. I have no idea what ward, really don't care. Just want to tell you, I watch your children at Kennedy Park with the crack dealers and the junkies. Think of that when you're complaining about curfew. I watch your children. I watch them get sucked in. Just think of that.
Matthew D. Agron, Ward 4. This is a good first step. It gives our police department more tools they can use to keep the citizens of the city of Lewiston safe. As previously noted, our police chief said at his press conference held in this very room not too long ago, how they stopped 2 underage youths late at night on a curfew check, and in the end, took 2 illegal guns off our streets. But this is not the magic answer that will fix, magically, the problems that Lewiston's having. But then again, there are no magic answers to this. Within the current curfew rules, there are enough exceptions, so there are a number of legitimate reasons why a minor can be out even after the new 10 p.m. restrictions are put in place. On the emancipation part, when you become emancipated, you're considered an adult. It's scary, but I will say this much, my foster child became an adult because he was emancipated by the state. Does he want to be an adult? Absolutely not. But then again, what 18-year-old wanted to be an adult? Now, I'll say the city of Lewiston needs to provide even more tools to our police department to help keep us safe. We're currently in the middle of a surge of violence and crime. Councilor Longchamp, you ran on a platform that included a plan to allow the Lewiston Police Department to designate an area, a high crime area. Please bring that plan forward. Right or wrong, you won with that as part of your campaign. Thank you very much.
Further public comment for this agenda item? Public comment is now closed. Councilor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. I highly support this, and as said earlier, my curfew was when the street lights came on. It was time to go home. So we really like summer, because the lights come on really late. To the person who was talking about amendment rights, this has tested continuously through the system under the First Amendment. Only political events, religious services, and death penalty about the only 3 exceptions that the courts would allow. So I believe kids have all the rights in the world, as long as their parents give them rights, because until they become an adult, they technically belong to their parents. Those unparented, obviously, we want to try to get help and service for. I believe this is the first step for us to try to get our city back together. I believe that young people do like structure and can follow rules, and when you structure something and they start to begin that there's certain times and curfews, that's the first step. Maybe the parents can't structure them, maybe we're going to help them in this process, and I believe that's why it's important to move forward. Our problem here in Lewiston is not unique. It's all across the country with gun violence and drugs and things of that nature, and we're all trying to do our own little part and piece. But I will remind everybody, how would you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. For those who come up here and say, we should do this, this, and this, let us finish chewing the first bite, and then we'll move on to the next issue. Doing multiple issues doesn't always work and can clutter or stop other issues from moving forward. We do appreciate your comments, and we do want to work with you all, but the reality is we have to take this in a phased, stepped type process, and I believe this is the first step. Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Najin.
So I just want to say, first off, a lot of interesting points were brought up, and I agree with quite a few of them. I also don't want to ever color the argument that youth are somehow criminal by nature. So I think that, there is a concern, obviously, that the municipal officials don't have a lot of power as far as like what we can do in order to curb violence in our community, or to control conditions in ways that state law doesn't permit us to act. And so in that, I do remember when I first moved to this community, there were actually activities for youth to do late on weekends. It was part of the economic activity of the city. There were nightclubs you could go to even. There used to be youth groups that would host events later in the night, giving again, some sort of structure around youth. And I think this is a place where we do need to invest in our city. We've lost a lot of our public spaces that kids could play in. There aren't any youth centers here. They're you know, that function at any, you know, hour other than like, you know, 7 to 4. So, you know, these are all just considerations as far as enacting, you know, the extension of this curfew. But I would say that we have to do whatever we can in order to prevent violence in our community. And if the statistics show that youth and young adults in our community are carrying firearms and discharging firearms in our city center, which it does, then you know, for the time being, I think it's a stopgap that we have to look at, and until we can build some type of community that actually supports youth. So,
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. I just had a couple questions for the police chief, just about process that came up during public comment. I guess the first one is, I know there are, or maybe it has changed, there used to be certain traffic violations where you couldn't pull someone over for that violation, but you could give them a ticket for it if you pulled them over for something more serious. And I wonder if this ordinance, if you see someone driving who looks to be under 18, can you pull them over for that, or no?
Well, if it would be past the curfew hours, yes, technically, yes. Would we, or could we even see in the car? Probably not. I can tell you that I stopped a lot of cars in my 32-year career, and I almost never know what's behind the steering wheel because of the glare in the middle of the day, and especially at night. You certainly don't have any idea. What happens often is we'll stop a car for whatever violation, and we'll find 3 17-year-olds in the car with a 24-year-old. That's not part of the family, and they're up to no good. So do we use that as a tool? Probably not, but do we find that they did violate curfew sometimes by mistake? All the time.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one was, so presuming you stop someone who looks to be under 18, you identify them and find out that they are in fact under 18 and it's past the curfew, are you able to pat them down for weapons, or like?
No,
what
we
is
would
your
still have to
procedure?
come up with some reason, whether it's a safety reason, we saw a bulge in their front pocket, or they were furtive movements or whatnot. There's certain things that we can stop and frisk somebody, but we can't just, we do respect constitutional rights. We can't just pull up to somebody and say, oh, there's a younger looking person, let's just pat them down for no reason. We wouldn't do that, or we can't do that.
Okay, thanks. And then the last thing is, it looks like the ordinance violation is technically by the parent. You know, if it were to come to, more than just a warning, like, we're going to call your parents and they're going to come pick you up. So is that what the typical procedure would be? Is if you took someone into custody and then you identify and call their parents and they come and pick them up, or you take them to their house?
It could be one or either one. If we have the time and the opportunity, we can give them a ride home. Yeah, a lot depends on the cooperativeness of the juvenile. If the juvenile is very combative and we have to take them into custody and bring them to the station and have the parents come get them, then sometimes we'd opt for that. We do run into some problems that sometimes the parents will say, like, no, they can stay with you for the night. And certainly we can't bring them to the youth center. So then now we're stuck babysitting them as well, so.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Further comments or questions from the council? Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Councilor from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Item number 7.
Item number 7, public hearing on an application for a business license renewal for Merrimack River Medical Services Incorporated for an outpatient addiction treatment clinic at 18 Mollison Way. 2 items for requested action. The first item is to conduct a public hearing to receive citizen input and comment regarding the application submitted by Merrimack River Medical Services Incorporated for renewal of their business license to operate an outpatient addiction treatment clinic at 18 Mollison Way in Lewiston.
The public hearing is now open. Should any members of the public wish to comment?
So Jocelyn Dixon, Bate Street, don't know what ward. So is that the only place where that addiction resource is gonna be? Because Lewiston, you got space, y'all. And people that need the help, most of them got no money, no transportation, no roof, no food. How you expect them to get a Mollison from Kennedy? Just saying.
Further public comment? Public hearing is now closed. Madam Clerk, item number 2.
Sure. Item number 2, to approve the license for an outpatient addiction treatment clinic for Merrimack River Medical Services Incorporated to operate a clinic at 18 Mollison Way, Lewiston, subject to the attached conditions.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councilor Glant, second by Councilor Harriman. Discussion? Yes, Councilor Nagy.
I just have a procedural question. So I guess we don't normally approve business licenses or hold public hearings. Is this like state statute or is this an ordinance that we hold?
This is city ordinance.
City ordinance, okay. And this applies to methadone clinics and?
Outpatient addiction treatment clinic, which is commonly called a methadone clinic.
Okay.
Yes, this type of business. We only have one in Lewiston, and it's up every time this year.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Further questions or comments from the council? And for the public's clarification, this is a renewal. It's not a new facility. Councilor Sol, did you have something? No. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Council from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 3.
Item number 8.
Item number 8, amendments to the city's personnel policies regarding social media policy manual number 22. Requested action to approve the proposed amendments to the personnel policies, city policy manual number 22, as recommended by the Director of Human Resources and the acting city administrator.
May I have a motion, please? Councilor Glant. Second by Councilor Sol. Administrator O'Malley.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This was brought forward by our Director of Marketing and Communications, who was looking to update our social media policy. If you look at it, it actually says YouTube, Instagram, and MySpace. So she wrote this with the assistance of the city attorney to update it to, as it says in the first paragraph, to ensure the rights or acknowledge the rights of city staff to engage in social media and set forth by their First Amendment rights. It's quite a few changes on it. A lot of them talk about employees should avoid, should avoid, should avoid. It doesn't say they can't do it, and it's just giving direction of what they should try to do on their social media. If you have any questions, Director Amores is here that she can address them.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Chittum.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I notice in the revision, social media, the term itself is not identified. I wonder, my question is, what's the origin of this change? I've looked through what is being removed and what is being added, and there are some nuances involved, but by and large, it says pretty much the same thing unless I'm missing something, and I'd like to have clarification.
These were updates, and these were the recommendations by the city attorney, Councilor Chittum.
Okay, thank you. The city attorney is happy with should avoid?
That is specifically city attorney verbiage.
What's the point of the policy if there's no requirement?
I think it's more of protecting the employees' First Amendment rights, and that's why it says should avoid. It doesn't say are not permitted or shan't or shall not. Or this is what the city attorney provided. So this is what Director Moraes and I are presenting to you folks.
Okay.
I will agree with that, but this is what the city attorney provided in order to make sure that city employees can speak on social media, on the different platforms out there. But it does say we should make clear that their views are personal, not representative of the official stance of the city. It doesn't say they can't do their views. It just says you can do that, but you should try to avoid these things.
You should. You should try and avoid
You should
it.
try to avoid. That's what the city attorney has recommended.
I think this is a toothless policy. I'm sorry, I disagree wholeheartedly with the city attorney.
Councillor Najin.
So just a few things just right off the bat. One, from what I'm hearing, this isn't an enforceable policy. Am I correct in that?
It would, I guess, be a case-by-case basis. The city attorney has recommended if we were to become aware of something before we took any type of disciplinary action, we should run it by the city attorney.
Okay. Interesting.
Councillors, Councillor Najin has been recognized. If you can please respect that, that'd be great. And if the audience could please refrain from speaking or laughing or anything else like that, that would be great. Thank you.
So this wasn't obviously initiated by council, and council, it's brought to council to approve as an amendment, but it's actually a policy replacement. Basically, the original policy is completely scratched out, and I agree that a lot of this is not actually germane to anything that the old policy anyways, that did anything that's happening in the real world today. My concern, and the reason why I'm asking these questions, I had 3 different city employees reach out to me to ask about what exactly this was and why. And so, I know we think that we're, the second largest city in Maine, but we're a small town. And there are 2 people that I think almost anyone in this room would immediately say, oh, that's them, on 2 different sides of the political aisle that are very vocal on social media. And the question there is their First Amendment rights when they're criticizing public officials or elected officials.
There's nothing here that says they can't do that, Councilor
Okay.
Jean.
One second, sorry, Administrator, if we can just let him finish.
There's a concern there, and so that was brought up. And I think also, like, when we refer to the operations perspective, I can think of one particular public works employee that's very helpful in Lewiston Rocks concerning paving schedules, things like that. And so the way that this is written out, it seems to dissuade people who work for the city to communicate on social media about how they feel about the city or the city functions, or be able to communicate anything about general information that could be useful. That's the way I read it, but.
Yes, Administrator O'Malley.
Yeah, when I look at the section, employees must not disclose confidential proprietary information about the city and its operations or its employees. So if they have an opinion they want to share, that's not disclosing confidential proprietary information. If you're talking about paving, I'm assuming you're talking about Justin Bisson, that's not confidential information. If someone wants to send a FOA request of what our paving schedule is, we will surely provide that. So it just says any confidential proprietary information. So if somebody doesn't agree with something that's happening, they can clearly say, this is my opinion. I work for the city, but this is my opinion. I'm not speaking for the Public Works Department or the Police Department or the library. It's just they can't disclose confidential proprietary information. I understand that.
That makes sense.
The wording, as Councilor Chittum has said, the should avoid is maybe new verbiage, but this is what our city attorney is recommending that we put in our policy.
Thank you, Administrator O'Malley. Councillor Glant.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilor Chittum. Unfortunately, I also agree with the change simply because in these times we have to have something in writing. If we don't, then everything will be out there and people will be doing whatever they want. Nothing in here is going to restrict any of our employees, any of us, from putting out what we want, what our values and our views are, and what we want to do. So I think personally, I like it because it allows them to do whatever they want, as long as it's not something that's confidential. So, and frees their hands, and those people who think that they're gonna be restricted are actually getting less restrictions, because they can put down what they want, without being prejudiced, without being brought forward, unless it's confidential or something that the city has, not said like we do when we do our sessions.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. I guess to the comments about the language being, kind of mushy, a policy can also be more of a guideline and not necessarily a strictly enforceable rules. So it's providing a guideline to employees about what they should do. I guess I also had a question for the administrator. I was wondering what the time frame of this was. Like, is there anything that prompted this, or was it just sort of a general review of policies?
Director Morez was hired in, I believe, September of '22, and this was part of her process. It's my understanding she was actually bringing it forward, of reviewing it back in October, and then obviously things took a back seat to that, and she's been waiting months for the city attorney to get back to her and to bring this back forward again. There's no secret agenda behind this. You look at this, the only thing it says is employees must not do is disclose confidential or proprietary information. And then there's more or less, as Councilor Chittum points out, more suggestions of what you should try to avoid. But really, in reality, the only thing it says you must not do is disclose confidential proprietary information. And that's it. The rest of it are suggestions, what you should try to avoid, but it doesn't say you can't do those things. So I don't think it prevents folks from exercising the First Amendment rights. That's why when Director Morris brought this forward to me, I said, when she was going to do this project, I said, okay, but I want you to involve the city attorney in this process. And this is what came forward.
Thank you. And I had just one more question. This seems to be directed at employees using their own, like their personal social media, and I wonder if this policy applies, or if there's another policy that applies to employees who are managing the city's social media and city departments.
That would be more on a department level policy in terms of Facebook postings and what we can put on, for the internal, for the marketing folks and for recreation, folks that have access to the web page. So that's a different policy. That's not part of the personnel policy.
Okay, thank you.
Further comments or questions from the council at this point? Councilor Chittum.
No, I'm sorry. No further questions.
No, okay. We are now going to public comment for this agenda item.
Thank you. Linda Scott, Ward 1. I actually had a lot written down, but I appreciate the questions that have already been asked and the understanding of who put this together, because to be quite honest with you, when I first read this, I was a little confused. I was wondering exactly what the reason for doing this was at this particular time. Did something happen to warrant this change? And who exactly put this before the council to be done? So I appreciate that some of that has been answered here. I still have some concerns about the ambiguity of the whole policy, in my opinion. When you use the words shall and you completely change a policy, it doesn't read an amendment change to me, which is what was described as in your packet. An amendment would have been removing the MySpace platform. It wouldn't have been wiping out the whole thing and rewriting the whole thing. That's the way I feel about this. I still have concerns that this sounds more punitive than it does a friendly amendment. And I still feel that with the shall and the ambiguity with it, some employees might feel very concerned about what they're posting. And who's watching that? Honestly, how many employees do you have in this city? Who's going to police this and watch all of those social media posts? And I find it very concerning. We have First Amendment rights in this country. I want the ability to say what I want to say about this city, whether I work for the city, I live in this city, I'm part of the city. As an former elected official, you get a stipend from the city. I mean, you're not technically city employees, but there's just so much ambiguity, and I have a lot of concerns about this whole thing. I honestly think it needs to be looked at, whether the city attorney looked at it already a little further, I think you need to look at case studies across the country where there have been already issues where employees have been, there's been court documentation that says that their First Amendment rights have been violated because the city, their governance that they work for, has overstepped the bounds and said that they shouldn't be saying that. We have city employees speaking greatly about this city all the time. But we also have to be ready to take negative comments as well. And I don't want negative comments or anything that's said that somebody may view as not the right vision for the city, for them to be punitive and get in trouble for it. I'm very concerned about the whole thing, and I would advise you just not to vote for this. And make sure, if you're going to, it's done very properly. And also make sure that all of your unions that work for the city take a look at this before it's put in final play. Thank you.
Luke Jensen, 11 Sylvan Avenue, Ward 5. One, I also have questions about who would police this. Is this someone who's going to get paid $30 an hour to check the online posts? Are we going to ask citizens to report violations that we see so neighbors are snitching on neighbors? That's not going to create a good environment in the city. I wonder who's going to be the judge of what proprietary and confidential, who's going to be the judge of that? And can such violation be grieved up to your guys' level so that you are the final judges on that? Or does it end at the administrative level? If it doesn't end with you guys, you really should define it now, or you're completely giving up the power to do that. Let's see, there's that, the judge. I guess I would also, if I was on the council still, I would not pass this without a guarantee, like language in there, that an employee cannot, and absolutely cannot, be punished for a post they put on social media. I get that they're allowed to, and you can't make any law that says you can't post. But you should also add to that, then they can't be punished after they make the post. So without that guarantee that, their actually job is safe, I mean, who's gonna want to apply here? When someone I've known for decades and trust with my life writes a 7-page resignation letter and 95% of it is blacked out, I have a lot of questions about what's going on in this building, guys. I'll be perfectly honest with you. And to see something that's coming before us that's gonna take away transparency, not add to it, why pass that? That's not gonna help. You guys get that. I just don't really see what problem this is addressing. I mean, I'd rather have a system of, I guess if it's a private company, you don't want an employee going off, spewing all sorts of private information, disgruntled employees making ridiculous claims against their employers, and their employers take a hit, stocks, whatever, it does happen. So I get if it was a private entity that this would be a good rule to put in place. I don't want to say it's a bad rule, it makes sense. It's just for the city, especially Lewiston where it's at right now, it just doesn't really help the big picture. I mean, again, when residents are really getting trash pickup, streets plowed, what else are they getting for their tax dollars? And they have a huge increase. And so people just want to have faith and know that the city's being run transparently. And I don't think this is a good effort. It doesn't really play into that. So those are my thoughts. Again, I wouldn't pass this without a guarantee that employees will not be punished for what they put on social media. Thank you.
Matthew D. Agron, Ward 4. So, I get the city needs to protect the public from city personnel using their position to share classified, restricted information with us. But at the same time, this new policy looks more like it's a social media gag order. It's so wide open to interpretation. There is no clear indication who is going to interpret this. So, for example, Bob Pena, a guy I just made up who works for Public Works, has a picture of him in a city vest on his social media page, but not as his avatar, decides to speak out on social media about the recent run of firearm use in the city. Is that violation of the rules? What about, for example, people who work for the city who are helping run campaigns for public office? Does speaking up for an opposition candidate violate city rules? It could under this loosely interpreted instructions. Who's authorized to use social media for the city on our dime, and what's the limit of what they can and can't do on that time? And, like everyone else is asking, who's monitoring this? All our city employees. Also, will this new policy be enforced for the council, the school committee as well? What about the various boards and commissions we have within the city? Some of us get paid stipulates to, come and sit up there and vote on decisions. We are technically city employees by that logic, just like you guys are, just like our school committee is. This is way too wide open to interpretation. I would say vote no on this, or send it back and have it rewritten so there's actually structure to it. Because there isn't structure. Shall means it's wide open to whatever interpretation, for example, Brian wants to make today might not be what Brian wants to make tomorrow. You guys need to fix this.
Matt Roy, Ward 3. I was going to say, I'll echo what Linda and Luke said. So, well, getting back to the the director of our social services department. So, this wasn't brought up in the budget. As we all know, our division in the administrator's office for communications and marketing is, actually, have we actually filled Dottie's position yet? That is a good question to ask here. Because we have a director, we have two coordinators under her within communications and marketing. And as all was pointed out in the budget season last year, our human resources department, whose job is actually personnel policy writing. This is their job. It's not the director of communication and marketing's job to write this policy. It's a personnel policy. In the policy, it's a HR personnel issue. So where this should be coming from, which apparently it wasn't until now, apparently, from the deputy city administrator, the former administrator knew about this because apparently this started 2 years ago, the now interim city administrator, which apparently I'm the only one that actually knows the definition of what an interim is versus acting, because every time in the packet it says acting city administrator, and apparently the deputy city administrator hasn't even updated his email signature. This is not even in the director of communications. I was going to say, enforcement, who's going to enforce this? We have 2 people in our HR department. And then getting back to what Linda was saying in, court precedents. Where's the Foley v. Town of Randolph disclosures on this? Getting back to that whole issue where, definitions and without a quote-unquote Foley disclosure or clause, there's no definition and enforceability in such a policy. And to say we have to strike the entirety of the old policy, rewrite it vaguely, just seems odd or weird, because apparently that's the vogue term in, governance these days. But anyway, I forgot where was I going with this. I had a thought there, but anyway, yeah. So again, this is not the communications department's writing on the policy. It's not their job. It's your job as council, ultimately. And then there's too much ambiguity here that still needs to be addressed. You should just table this and just table it.
Hi, folks. Alicia Ray, Ward 3. I don't want to repeat anything anyone said, but employees are telling us that they are concerned about the specific mandatory sentence in there that Acting City Administrator O'Malley called out as the one mandatory, not squishy part of this policy. I think a couple questions that I think should be answered. Are there still whistleblower protections available to city staff and employees? How do the collective bargaining agreements factor in? Has this been run by the unions? And then the last question, sorry, bear with me. I had a lot of First Amendment mumbo jumbo in here, but you all covered that ground. Those two. Yeah, I would respectfully request that this council do a workshop on this and make sure that we've fleshed out all of those issues at this point. Thank you.
Further public comment? Back to the council. Yeah, so yeah, no, thank you. I'm recognizing myself at this point. Everyone will get a chance. Yeah, I just have some concerns that this, and I realize the distinction between should and shall. This could be perceived as just having a chilling effect, and I think we should err on the First Amendment side of things. And, for instance, employees should avoid referencing the employee's position, role, or employment. And so, one comment that, just came to mind was, if you have an employee, Bob, who starts off a comment with, in my 32 years at Public Works, and then goes on, does that, cause for alarm? A workshop could be in order. Councilor Longchamps, did you have something?
Yes. From the beginning, when I looked over this, it was quite confusing to me. So I would prefer we have some sort of workshop or speak with the attorney. Or I'm not against it. I'm just not completely understanding it. So I think a workshop is definitely needed. That's it.
Councilor Najin.
So first, I do want to commend our communications director for trying to even tackle this. It's, there are certain things that I would love to see changed in one of these pieces, personnel policy for social media communication. I think it's important, but at the same time, I mean, we have incorrect phrases in French on our building. We have a website where links don't work. It's a question of I think priority as far as is what we're trying to accomplish right now. And one of the things that I think we're trying to do is attract and retain quality staff. And if staff is concerned about this policy, I would say that we should allow some type of feedback from staff before we would enact something like this. And I think also it's important to make clear that this is a guideline and not enforceable, with the exception of the one part that is enforceable, and that somewhere in here that it should be mentioned that your conduct on social media does not affect your opportunities for employment or advancement in the city, because that's I think that would be a concern. And I know there are people that are employees in the city who are very active on social media, and there are also constituents in some cases. And so, and not all of them have great things to say about me in particular. But I want them to be able to say those things. So, yeah, without fear of feeling like that somehow their opportunities in the city would be limited.
Councilor Gallant.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to think we're all adults, and our employees are adults, and they can make these decisions on their own. But anybody out there in the real world who's looking for a job, who puts things on Facebook that aren't appropriate against their job or anything else, and don't think it impacts their next job, ought to really be thinking about that. There's nobody out there not looking at somebody's history, wherever it's at, whether it's against somebody. So if they went against you and you had a chance to hire them, chances are you wouldn't do that. Chances are. I think we should scratch everything after the first, and I don't want a workshop only because I don't want time. Simple thing is, the policy is employees' use of social media, we go with the city recognizes, the policy applies to everyone, and it says you can't do this. Everything below that, scratch it. We're adults. They should know, they shall not, they should do. How easy would it be to have a 3-sentence policy where you don't have to deal with all this stuff and assume people are going to be adults? I don't need to sit down with everybody here and every union, everybody else, somebody say, I don't like this one, I don't like that one. Quite frankly, we want to put restrictions, which we have a right to do, and the only restrictions we have a right to do is it says confidential, property information, things like that. That's all we can do. Everything below that, throw it away. And let's move forward with this policy. Thank you.
Councilor Chittum.
I move to table this indefinitely.
Does this motion have a second?
I would second that.
It's been seconded. Discussion on the current motion? Councilor Gallant, did you want to say something?
Yes, I prefer not to table it so we can put it to bed today.
Yes, Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. Yeah, first I wanted to thank the communications director for her work on this. I'm fine with the policy as is, but if other folks want to take another look at it, I'm perfectly fine with that, whether that is a workshop or just some other process where we table it now and then take a look at it. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, Councilor Chittum.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like clarification from the city clerk. A motion to table indefinitely kills this, but that does not mean that it can't be brought back in another form as an amendment to the existing policy. It would leave the existing policy in place until another proposed change to that policy comes forward. But this one would be dead. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Najin.
And just to verify as well, when a move to table is on the table, the only discussion that can happen is germane to tabling.
Correct.
Further comments from the council? Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
So just for clarification, the motion before you is to postpone this matter indefinitely. Counselor from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Item number 10.
Item number 10? Is that,
We have completed 9, correct?
right, we did 9, so item number 10.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Item number 10, approval of First Amendment of lease between the Lewiston and the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company. Requested action to authorize the acting city administrator to execute the attached First Amendment of lease between the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company landlord and the City of Lewiston tenant for several surface parking lots along Lincoln Street owned by the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councilor Chittum.
Second.
Second by Councilor Gallant. Director Jeffers, please kick us off.
Yes, this is really a continuation of a lease that was first established back in 2004. The main the main Department of Transportation was trying to establish a right-of-way to reconnect rail going to Canada down to Lisbon and better connect everything. They gave the Lewiston Auburn Economic Growth Council, working on behalf of the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company, money, a grant to buy up properties. These properties were part of that. Ultimately, that reestablishment of rail did not occur. The period where they could, Maine DOT could have laid claim to it passed. So at this point, Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company owns it. The city of Lewiston leased those spaces. We gave them 10% of the revenues coming in from those. That we're through the 20-year option. This is another 20-year lease. First term of that is 5 years with 3 5-year renewals. Instead of being 10% of the revenues being generated, it'll be $1 a year. One issue that came up over the term of the last lease was when carnivals would come to town to support the Balloon Festival or other events. By the first lease, that was really not allowed. Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company provided some latitude on it, but this one cleans that up a bit and says, just let us know. We'll give you up to 30 days to put an event there, something other than parking. So I think it cleans things up dramatically, drops our costs significantly. It wasn't out. I think it was about $4,000 a year is what we'd be spending in the past, but the railroad's been a very good partner, and this is recognized just a way to allow the city to keep moving forward.
Thank you. Yes, Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify which properties these were. It looks like it's the big lot that's across Lincoln Street from Hope Haven on that corner.
Yeah, it includes that. I mean, it gets a little bit complicated, but yes, we had sold them 3 of the 4 lots that comprise that big lot across from the convenience store around the corner of Cedar and Lincoln. It's primarily the lot across from FX Marcotte. Some of that is leased to the Station Grill, so it's not the entirety of that parcel. And really, that's the real estate involved.
Okay, and also the parking lot that's across Lincoln Street from the convenience store?
That's the one when you
Okay.
said Hope Haven. The land across from Hope Haven is actually not a parking lot. That's just, it is owned by the Lewiston Railroad Company, but it's not used for parking at this point. It's green space. And they're hoping to extend the trail through there, starting there.
Right.
But this is really the surface lot across from the convenience store, the lot across from FX Marcotte, although FX Marcotte, because they sold some of that real estate, has rights to continue to park some vehicles there, and the Station Grill has rights to park some vehicles down on their end of that lot.
Okay, thanks. And one question is, how will this affect the ability to build other things on those lots? Because I know there's, the Station Grill they're leasing some parking, FX Marcotte is leasing some, but besides that, it would really, especially with the Riverfront Island master plan that we're trying to build up that area, I'd really like to see development on some of those lots, and I'm just wondering how this would affect that.
If we were, this would limit our ability to develop anything on it. If the city, I think the railroad would be receptive. We have 6 out of the 9 votes on that board are City of Lewiston directors. If we had a development project that required this real estate, it would need to be another request to Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company, but I think it would be well received.
Okay, and at least it goes in 5-year chunks anyway, so
Correct.
It's a little bit easier that way.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Glant.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I'm a little confused. We're going to lease it to them for how much?
They own it. We're leasing the lots from the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Company. It'll be $1 a year. We've got the obligations to maintain them, plow them, light them. All the costs of ownership carry to us. But all we're paying them to have the right to park other people on it is $1 a year.
Is it available to be bought by the city?
We could certainly have, if that's a request of the city, we could certainly have that conversation.
I'm thinking long range at a homeless shelter across from Hope Haven. That parking lot, that whole area would be a good place to establish one. So I'm curious to hear, and I'll reach out to you later to get more details on the whole process and how that works. Because, we may be at a point sometime we want to do something along that line, and that would be a good location. Thank you.
Councillor Najin.
Just real quick, I really appreciate the price on this lease, and considering the way that we engaged space during the Balloon Festival and the ways that we're trying to activate Mr. Martin Payne Park, I love the fact that we can consider other options for this space for up to 30 days. Even like the Smokies Greater shows, right? It's not exactly my thing, but I do remember when it used to be at Heritage Park, right? And like people used to literally have to dart across Main Street in order to go to Smokies Greater shows. And just that one element attracts folks to public, and I'm not saying it has to be, carnival rides. It can be all kinds of different things that exist in this space. So I do like that flexibility option too, and I just want to say, I'm in full support. So,
thank you,
Councillor Chittum.
Thank you. Full disclosure: I am one of the 6 directors from Lewiston on the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Corporation. This, I believe, came at LARC's initiative. We decided that the current lease agreement, which had been in existence for 20 years as of yesterday, was a little bit gaumy, and to clean things up, the Lewiston Auburn Railroad Corporation board said, let's simplify it, $1 a year, let's clean up the issues that we had with unauthorized use of the parking lots. To answer other questions, I'm sure that the LARC board would be interested in discussing the sale of that. And again, if the lease were to require amendment at any point during any of the 5-year periods, that would be amenable. We'd be amenable to discussion of that as well.
Public comment for this agenda item. Back to the council. Further comments or questions? Anything further, Director Jeffers?
I believe this covers it.
We appreciate you. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Ward 3,
Yes.
Ward 4,
Yes.
Ward 5,
Yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes,
Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 to 0.
Thank you. Councilors, do we need to take a quick break, or are we keeping going?
Let's go.
Madam Clerk, next agenda item.
Item number 11, order authorizing use of federal asset forfeiture funds to address safety concerns at the range. Requested action to approve the order authorizing the use of federal asset forfeiture funds to address safety concerns at the range.
May I have a motion, please?
so moved.
Councilor Glant.
Second.
Second by Councilor Chittum. Beat you by a hair. Chief, please.
Sure. I'll just read on this. It's pretty simple. The roof on our current firearms trailer is over 20 years old. The roof on our trailer, which is over 20 years old, is leaking, which caused the seams to become dried and cracked, and the roof to leak down to the interior wooden walls of the trailer. It's caused mold issues. We've had those mold issues remediated, at least we thought we did, and the mold is back. It was brought to us in a safety concern by the union that this trailer needs to be replaced. It was passed on to us from the hazmat team back many years ago, and it had, on top of it, it had an air conditioning unit, which was needed for the hazmat team, but it wasn't needed for us. That started to leak, caused a lot of water to get into the unit, and it's pretty much destroyed, and it's past its useful life. So with that safety concern, that was brought, we got some quotes, and that's what we're looking for, to use drug forfeiture money to purchase a new trailer and the shelving inside, as well as to also fund another safety concern was people were tripping at our current firearms range on rocks that had come through, and it used to be a quarry. It no longer is, from what I understand, that the city's found an alternative location for that, but we still use it as the range, and we want people to be safe when they're qualifying, particularly when they qualify at night like they're doing this week. So we'd like to fund that with to put some stone dust down so that it's a flat surface for them to walk and kneel on while they're shooting.
Thank you. Councilor Glant?
One quick question, Chief. Is the old one salvageable to be sold for any money or towards this particular?
My
bill?
understanding, it's in pretty poor shape, and if we can trade it into the vendor that's the lowest bid, we will.
That's fine, just curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you.
I was going to say, not after the description that he just gave of the trailer.
Right. Maybe they're not watching.
Further comments from the council? Councilor Najin.
So first and foremost, I'm always going to be supportive of equipment. Absolutely. I do, not to belabor a point, but it's interesting that you have a particular fund that cannot be accessed, that you have access to for the police department, that we don't really have a lot of say over where it goes unless you're asking for the piece. So I just want to point that out, but I completely support this 100%. And also, at some point in time, not completely off track, but we should check in on the earmarks to figure out some other equipment pieces, whether or not we're going to get some congressional help there. So
We have a big congressional ask that's out there right now that is past a big hurdle, but we're still waiting for confirmation on that, and it's a nice one.
yeah, I think the officer safety in that case, especially related to what the events of October 25th, it's certainly needed. So, yeah, I'd appreciate any update as soon as we know.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Public comment for this agenda item? Back to the council. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Council from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes,
Yes.
Word 2.
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Item number 12.
Item number 12, resolve authorizing city staff to apply for, accept, and appropriate a U.S. EPA 2024 Environmental and Climate Justice Community Change Grant of up to $20 million for energy efficiency and weather resiliency project for the benefit of Lewiston homeowners, building owners, and businesses. Requested action to conduct a public hearing and to approve the resolve authorizing city staff to apply for, accept, and appropriate a U.S. EPA 2024 Environmental and Climate Justice Community Change Grant of up to $20 million for energy efficiency and weather resiliency projects for the benefit of Lewiston homeowners, business owners, building owners, and businesses.
So moved.
One second, councilors. Madam Clerk, so we need to conduct a public hearing first, it sounds like?
Yes.
Or we can roll this into
You can probably
public
roll it all
comment for...
together, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, may I have a motion, councilors?
So moved.
Councilor Chittum, second by Councilor Harriman. Director Jeffers, can you please kick us off?
I'd be happy to. This is two grants that you had a workshop on specifically back in late August. Nate Libby presented on it. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's an EPA grant. It's really to take federal dollars and be able to put them into our buildings, whether it's, one of the grants is for municipal infrastructure. The other one's really targeted more towards our housing stock in Lewiston, as well as workforce development. It was a pretty lengthy workshop. This is really just giving us the authorization to go ahead and apply and accept and appropriate if we get it. And it's sort of checking off that box.
Thank you. Discussion from the council? Yes, Councilor Longchamps.
I am just wondering, this particular monies, is it going to go to just like big developers, large developers, or can smaller developers?
Yeah, no, this is not intended for a Continental Mill project. This is, a large portion of it is working with youth and getting them into trades, training programs, and helping them learn the skills so they can then work on projects for smaller houses. Somebody says, my house needs to be rehabbed, I need a new HVAC system, I need new windows, I need new electrical. This is giving them the training to be able to do that work and really meet these.
So smaller developers?
Smaller developers or individuals. It's not even for big projects.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Najin.
So I just have a question as far as, I'm reading through the stakeholder groups, and I noticed that both Healthy Homeworks and Raise Up Housing Cooperative are indicated here, and I know that there's a lot of work that they both do in our community. I'm just wondering, what's the selection process in that, and why were these folks decided upon? Was it simply because we already have a relationship, or is there other connections here?
Yeah, I have not been the one writing the grant, and they are certainly part of the mix, and certainly both have done great work. I think it's a Maine Labor Council or Maine Labor Resiliency. It was the gentleman who used to work at Bates College who presented with Nate that night, has been a big part of the driving force. He has been the bigger voice of all those stakeholder groups.
Okay, and one of the things I would just like to reiterate, we do have, last council had extended the way that our community development block grant funds can be used to help individuals, so it's not centered just in the community block grant census tracts, and we have seniors in our community who are struggling even with the cost of their property tax, right? And so in places where we can make sure that a lot of this money goes to individuals, I would prefer that. And then another piece just to speak to, just as something to think about, the city does not have a lot of public spaces that we can host, for instance, when we have a power outage, right? We don't have a building that everybody can go to. Is there some way we can apply for some of this to help, for instance, the armory? I know we're looking at an HVAC unit for the armory and, things like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've got two actions here. The next one is really talking about more of the municipal infrastructure, but since we're on it, and we can maybe speed through the second issue, A couple of the issues that have been coming forth is HVAC equipment at one of the fire stations, dehumidification over at the library, which has been an ongoing concern, a generator at the armory. Another eligible cost is building a shelter, bricks and mortar. So these could be very useful grants for a lot of the city's goals.
Thank you.
Yep.
Further comments from the council? Public comment for this agenda item. Back to the council. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Council from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Item number 13.
Item number 13, resolve authorizing city staff to apply for, accept, and appropriate the U.S. EPA 2024 Environmental and Climate Justice Community Change Grant of up to $20 million for energy efficiency and weather resiliency project for municipally owned facilities. Requested action to conduct a public hearing to approve the resolve authorizing city staff to apply for, accept, and appropriate a U.S. EPA 2024 Environmental Climate Justice Community Change Grant of up to $20 million for energy efficiency and weather resiliency projects for municipally owned facilities.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councilor
Second.
Chittum, second by Councilor Gallant. Director Jeffers.
I don't really have anything new to add. I'm happy to address questions, but I think we covered it in the last item.
Fair enough. Questions or comments from the council? Public comment. Back to the council. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Council from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Item number 14.
Item number 14, amendment to the traffic schedule to remove 3 prohibited parking spaces and amend the location of 1 prohibited parking space on Park Street between Pine and Spruce Street. Requested action to approve the amendments to the traffic schedule to remove 3 prohibited parking spaces and amend the location of 1 prohibited parking space on Park Street between Pine and Spruce Street.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Councilor Gallant.
Second.
Second by, Councilor Chittum, second by Councilor Gallant. I appreciate everyone's patience. Chief St. Pierre.
So this is really just a housekeeping and the cleanup of language from what I can see. Back some years ago, some curb bump outs were put here on Park Street, and there were no changes made to the traffic amendment at that time, and they needed to be done now that that work is being done. A fire hydrant measurement where it's currently located has changed a little bit from the road design, so that needs to be added as well. That's basically it. So it's just some language change to incorporate what needs to be on there, or changes that need to be made as presented.
Councilor Chittum.
Thank you. I'm sure these are required. I'm glad to see that we're removing language that refers to 583 feet 5 inches from an undetermined measuring point. The more often we can do that in our ordinances, the happier I'll be.
Councilor Najin.
And just to drive this home, I believe I'm reading this correctly. We're gaining 3 parking spots and losing 1, right? So basically, it's a +2 on the parking.
I believe so, yes.
Sounds awesome.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you. This is a little bit tangential, but just to put in people's minds, I feel like at some point we need to look at the parking around City Hall and the park. I'm all for employees having easy access to parking, but sometimes it's tough for the public to get parking spaces around here. And then also the park is really a public amenity that people should be able to drive to and reasonably find a parking spot. We've got city garages that I feel like the employees could park in, and I know things will change a bit when the police department moves. A lot of those spaces will be freed up. But I just wanted to mention that just for future conversation.
Now you've done it. No, thank you, Councilor Harriman. Further comments or questions from the council? Public comment for this agenda item. Back to the council. Thank you, Chief. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Council from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
We are now up to reports and updates. Should there be any? Yes, Councillor Gallant.
I guess I would direct this first to the city clerk. Do I have any more senior applications at all? None have come in?
We do not know.
We processed all the ones that, can I have a copy of all the ones that came through the door?
Sure.
Thank you. And then, that being said, I need people for the senior council. We have some things coming down the pike here that can be very interesting, and the more bodies we have will make it easier to process. I do have one more follow-up. It's number 16, I'll wait, sorry. What wards am I still missing?
1, 2, 4, and 5.
That's right, yeah.
I believe 3, 6, 7, and the at-large from the mayor have been appointed.
Did you put one in?
You had one.
We had one for 4 for sure, I know.
Yeah.
That's why I want to see them all.
We had one for 4. And I gave you the email that said.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to go back. Did you email us, Counselor? I'll have to go back through the emails if you emailed.
He mailed to me, so I probably didn't send it to you, so we'll fix that.
Thank you.
That'd be my fault. Me, I'm it.
We're all doing our best, and I appreciate that. Anything further at this time, Councillor Gallant?
No, sir, Mayor.
Further reports and updates? Mayor, any reports or updates? No. Okay. Just double checking. And we are now, with that, we are now up to new business. Should there be? And Councillor Gallant, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to know how and who we have to deal with for bus transportation and route changes, and how that goes about. Do we need to bring them here? Do we propose something?
You could propose something to the gentleman sitting
Next to me, I know.
next to you. He and I are both on the Transit Committee. So if there's things you want us to bring up, you can email myself or Councilor Chittiman. We can send that over. And
Well,
we
with
can.
the warming center coming online, I would like to see a change to help affect the warming center, obviously. And I can't find where we publicize our routes very clearly. It's not at the bus station. You would think you would have a plaque, blue line, red line, whatever, like other cities have.
Western Maine Transportation takes care of that. They have it on their website. I know they have, but sometimes the route changes due to lack of drivers. I know there is a cost associated with when we change routes, and we have to get Lewiston and Auburn to agree to that. And there's, the time schedule. I don't know if you've ever ridden the bus, but it actually runs on about like the hour.
Yep.
So sometimes it can take somebody about 2 hours to go to Walmart and then come back home to Lewiston.
I did try it, so that's why I'm asking these questions.
Okay. But yeah, Western Maine Transportation. But if you have some suggestions of routes changes you'd like to see, Councilor Chittiman, I can bring that up at our next meeting.
All right, thank you. And the second item would be I'd like to see a third councilor parking spot. It seems when I come to meetings during the day, they're always filled. And I know my colleagues are not all here all the time. But that or the police need to be more proactive with ticketing or something from that area. We have a lot of meetings here at 12 o'clock, we have 1 o'clock, and it's a real pain when I have to drive down and park where the police park and have to walk up here. Thank you.
Yes.
Further new business? Councillor Harriman?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to just bring up and put on everyone's radar if there are some potential tenant protections that we could initiate as a city that could be stronger than the state language. I'm thinking, for instance, like the notice for a no-cause eviction is only 30 days, which really is unreasonable in order to find other accommodation. Rent increase is 45 days, which is a little more reasonable, but could be strengthened. And then the other one that might take a lot more discussion is some sort of rent stabilization. And I know it may be sort of inconclusive as to whether it actually has its intended effect. So I just wanted to bring those up as just future discussion topics, see what other folks think about them, and just put them in people's minds.
Councillor Nagy.
So just to piggyback on Councilor Harriman's statements, I think we're seeing a level of gentrification that we didn't actually expect to come anytime soon. And so there are situations in which properties are changing hands and rents have to go up. That's a big challenge. I think one of the bigger challenges is lot slips currently. So basically,
I'm sorry, say that again?
Your lot rent at mobile homes, mobile home parks. I think it's a lot easier to find an apartment, even if you're month to month, than it is to move your mobile home when your slip rent goes up 2-3 times. And so there is possibly municipal action we could take there. I would like to possibly suggest that we go to the Housing Committee for feedback on some of these things, as well as, there are ordinance changes that we could look at that would allow, for instance, permitting for RVs, for instance, as a temporary domicile, possibly looking at the overall size of an efficiency apartment. Right now, we have 300 square feet as a rentable unit, a family unit. Could we possibly look at, lowering those things? And I think feedback from the Housing Committee would be helpful in that. So I think possibly if we package up a series of things that could either incentivize more space for folks to develop, or better ways for folks to develop, and then also some protections for what we're seeing right now, which is that properties that were all continually undervalued for a very long time are changing hands, and it's displacing some folks. And also, separate from that, I would really like a workshop on our lead program. I would like to see exactly how it's been done by the numbers, and then also I would like to see how it fits with the state guidance for the way that we run the program. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, we had mentioned previously about abutters, right? When you're remediating a property, whether or not you have to notify abutters. I've read through the agreement with the state. It looks like we're supposed to. It looks like we're supposed to actually reach out to abutters and say, hey, we're remediating the lead on this house. So, lead poisoning is a serious thing. It's definitely, when you look at the numbers of children in our community that are affected by lead poisoning, both in Lewiston and Auburn, we need this program, and we also need it to work. And so I would like to see how it does work now, and kind of maybe dispel some of the myths that are out there, but also clean up maybe some of the processes that are out there right now.
Councilor Gallant.
2 quick items, I promise. Piggybacking on the housing, are we able, as a council, to ask them to do things? That's my first question. I think what we're hearing up here is tasking them to get information for us and bring it back. So
When you mean that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but...
the Housing Committee.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I think we should put something together as a group and forward it to them, and then maybe we can have them come back and report, because a lot of valid questions, and I've got a couple myself I wouldn't mind throwing in there without eating up more time. Getting back to our youth real quick, I'd like to have the youth program director look at maybe organizing some kind of evening thing on a Friday night for kids at the Armory. We have a great place, facility. I, for one, would be willing to go into the pockets if we have to get more money because you didn't plan for it, a little overtime to have it set up, a sock dance. They got pickleball over there, they got a little basketball tournament. We keep talking about the kids on the street, kids on the street, kids on the street. We have a beautiful building over there with a lot of space. I think we could probably try to figure out how we can start using that at nighttime and get the kids off the street, especially during the school time. So I would like to ask her to look into that or think about that and maybe come back and give us an answer, please. Thank you.
Administrator O'Malley, the Armory has a significant amount of programming.
Yes, after school and in the
already.
evening hours. So I think
Yes.
Councilor Najin misspoke when he said that everything stops at 4 o'clock at the Armory. They do have evening programs over there. I know they have, depending on different times of year, they have open basketball. I mean, they do a lot of the pickleball during the day. But I can have Director Welch come in and speak to all you folks about the programming and stuff they have there and any suggestions you'd like to make.
Perfect. And then in the meantime, if you could have Director Welsh forward us the calendar for the Armory, just so we can avail ourselves of everything that goes on over there. Anything further, Councillor Gallant? No. Okay.
No, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Chittum, yes.
Thank you. Some weeks ago, I sent an email to members of the council asking for suggestions on items that we could propose to our legislative delegation. One action has been taken. Since then, I've learned that there's nothing that the folks in Augusta can do because of the Supreme Court decision, and I forget what that was right now. But my point is, time is a-wasting. And if we are going to act as a council to suggest actions for our legislative delegation, we should be talking about that. If I don't hear anything further, I'm simply going to submit these as a citizen of this state.
Councillor Nagy.
I just want to respond to that really quickly. Interim Minister O'Malley, you're right. I didn't recognize the Armory, and I apologize for that. I certainly think that our recreation program is great. I think one of the issues, of course, is that it's a giant city, and we have one building. And so, you look at Auburn, who has, I think, 2 ice rinks, Ingersoll, 4 community centers, and we don't have that infrastructure. And that's what I was speaking to, is keeping kids active in their community, in their neighborhoods, it's a challenge. We don't have a lot of resources as far as that is concerned. So I just wanted to clarify that and apologize to the Recreation Department, because you're absolutely correct. They do a great job over there.
I appreciate everyone's consideration. Councillor Roy, did you have something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If the council has questions to bring to the Housing Committee, email me. I'll get them in the Housing Committee. Yeah. We meet second Wednesday of every month, so if you get them to me this week, I'll have them for next week.
Excellent. Seeing no further new business, Madam Clerk, I believe we have an executive session.
You do. Item number 17, executive session pursuant to Maine Revised Statutes annotated Title I, Section 4056A, to discuss a personnel matter. Requested action, to enter into an executive session pursuant to Maine Revised Statutes annotated Title I, Section 4056A, to discuss the personnel matter.
I have a motion, please.
So moved.
Councillor Chittum.
Second.
Second by Councillor Nagy. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Councilor from Ward 3?
Yes.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2? Motion passed by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you, City of Lewiston. Thanks for sticking with us here, and have a wonderful evening.